Welcome back to This Is Dunder Moose. I got BDubs back in the studio. Well, he's in his house. I'm in mine. It's kind of a studio. It's basement. Anyhow, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad that you're here for a conversation that shouldn't be as frustrating as it is. But over the last couple of weeks, I had the FDA come audit us at work, and I was really just irritated and out of patience from that because it was like 10-hour days every day. And then on top of it, I found us relitigating this, what feels like settled game science for me. So we're here. If you did not look at the thumbnail before you clicked on it, we're here to talk about one-to-one time. And I'm here as ever with the bubbly and effusive BDubs. So, BDubs, why don't you start us off by telling us how on earth are we supposed to trust that you know anything about one-to-one time in the first place?
Finally, BDubs 1776 has returned, has come back to Who is Dunder Moose?
That's right.
Who is this person?
I gotta say, since the last time you were on it, it's like taken off. I've gotten like at least 6 more subscribers.
That is the BDubs rub, my friend. 6 subscribers for my, what'd you say, effervescent? I don't know what you were saying, but
yeah, it was.
Yes, that is me. That describes me in a whole. I know what I'm talking about on one time because I was there when it began.
And but you didn't always play one-to-one time, right? Like you've got experience of the other side. Were you a pause timer at one point?
In the bad old days, there was only darkness and pause time for all of us. We've all been there, my friend. We've all been in the middle of the dungeon and said, it's late. We're all tired. Our run friend is passed out drunk. We've all been there and said, it's time to pause.
Yeah.
Okay. And you come back. You say you're going to be back next week. That doesn't happen. You say you're going to be back in 2 weeks. It doesn't happen. 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, you're talking about how you can't get there because it's Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And then you're talking about how you can't get there because it's Christmas break. And then you get sick. So a year later, you're back to that dungeon and thinking, I don't remember this PC. I don't remember this dungeon. I don't remember what's happening. And you go to your poor, put upon, frazzled DM and say, please, I hope your notepad that you were scribbling on last year is useful. Because none of us remember anything. We just don't.
Yeah, that went through the wash. Well, it's not on pause time players to keep track of that crap, right?
No, pause time players are like DM. You just do it all. You do everything.
Yeah,
we barely. We're barely there. We barely care.
They show up. You ask them to put their phone down long enough for you to try and catch them up with the last week on a special episode recap.
I mean, they'll probably remember what they were doing in Bejeweled when they were playing a year ago.
Yeah,
they'll remember that crossword they were doing on their phone last year during the last session. But they're probably not going to remember the actual session. Yeah, what was the Wordle? Angry Birds, Star Wars. They'll remember that. They'll have their high score. But what was actually happening in the D&D game last session with variable time? It will get lost in the ether.
Yeah,
it'll get lost like Austin Theory's Push. It's going to be really sad. It's just going to happen, and there's not much we can really do about it. Except, wait a second, the BrOSR has discovered something that Gary talked about a long time ago, which is one time. Jeffrogaxian timekeeping.
That's right. And Jeffro even points out BDubs invented Jeffrogaxian timekeeping.
I did. I named it after him because I'm nice. And if it all fell apart and blew up in his face, then he would get blamed and not me. So I was thinking 2 ways with that.
Yeah. And so the thing is, when you start talking about this stuff, and you do so in the hopes that there are curious players out there that want to try something new to elevate their game. As I've said before, if you are totally satisfied with the way your game is going, this is not for you. For those of us that feel like it should be something more, and you can't quite put your finger on it, then this is something for you to try. But I feel like there's a lot of resistance when you start talking about this stuff, and I feel like much of that resistance comes from people who assume that nobody playing one-to-one time has ever actually tried pause time, or that we didn't get it or something. And like, I feel like that's ridiculous. Like, by their own admission, almost everybody plays pause time, right?
Yes. Everyone plays pause time. So the idea that we've never tried it is nuts. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know who would be the person that's only ever played one time. Who would that be? Would it be some old decrepit dude who was there with Gary at the beginning that is still sort of like, liching around? Like, who would
No,
this
those
be?
are the guys
Or would
that are
it be,
mad.
or yeah, those are the guys that are mad. Or would it be some young guy who's like never played any D&D, and he shows up and he was lucky and blessed enough to stumble onto the BrOSR
Mm-hmm.
and brought into the fold of greatness.
Yeah.
And
And
made
somebody
part
who
of
hadn't
us.
already absorbed the game as part of their identity, that didn't feel threatened when someone says there's a better way to do it, right? Because I feel like that a lot of it is just we are surfing on waves of cognitive dissonance. And like noobs like me, I hadn't played for 40 years, right? I came in, I was playing it, I was like, there's something not right about this. I was looking around, I saw hashtag BrOSR, and this is like right around the time you guys were doing Brovenloft, and I was like, here's some people doing crazy stuff I've never heard of, and they seem to be having the time of their lives. They're mean to each other, and they're arguing, and it's like iron sharpening iron. They're like getting, their position is being challenged, and they're having to defend it, and they're doing it. And that was fascinating to me. So I was like, these guys have something I can learn from. And I feel like that puts me in a huge minority. That like most of the people that see you guys say, I can't learn from them. They're poopy heads or whatever.
Yes, that is what they say. That's the term they use, my friend, poopy heads.
So all right, let's enough. Let's actually get to some solid examples, right? And I want you to react to these as you hear of them. I've got kind of a host of honest objections and dishonest ones. And it all started with a tweet on February 9 where I said, explaining one-to-one time can get wearisome. I want someone to explain to me why pause timing is so great. What are the benefits? What are the affordances? Why is it worth defending so hard? And when I posted that, I just got a ton of interaction.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Okay.
I'll tell you, man. You talk about the BDubs rub. You got 6 more followers, which is what 3% more people than you had before, which is amazing. I mean, that's what I bring to the table, my friend. When I come out there, that's like 1.5 people per hour I was on last time. So it's really something else. I'm bringing that to you. But also, am I turning you heel? Because that's not what we want. We have enough heels. As I talked about last time, you seem to be losing your patience with the fools and the geeks. And I get it. I've been there. And it can get a little bit old. And I can tell when you are turning heel, it's one thing we notice if you watch WWE, which you should. They grow out their facial hair. So you've kind of got the douchey mustache while you turn heel. So is that what's happening here? Did you get so mad that you felt like you had to grow out your mustache?
Part of it is just I enjoy the benefits of the waves of masculine authority that radiate out from a mustache.
You told me in the back channel before we started that I was the one that was going to do the comedy. You'd be the straight man. And I saw your mustache. I was like, how are you going to be the straight man with that mustache? That was something else that occurred to me.
This is a cop stash. This is authoritarian. This is not a village people mustache.
I mean, I guess you have authority over the village people with that.
All right, that does it. I'm shaving it. I'm gonna make my wife happy for once.
She might have the right call this time.
I do feel like my teeth came out a little, and that's not my brand. Like I've been accused of not being not having enough edge to be a heel and just kind of being a face of faces. Uh but it wasn't you. I feel like you guys are doing a good job holding down the heel. I don't feel like there's room or necessarily a vacuum for me to fill with that. I just feel like you can only explain yourself to bad faith arguments so many times before you get irritated.
I use them to set up for punchlines because I've always kind of liked comedy. So I'm just like, let me see what I can do with this guy's dumb comment. So we're gonna do that live right now. So
All right.
that I can hear an honest objection, I can hear a dishonest one. I'll see what I can answer.
Okay, well,
I have all the answers. Whether these geeks and morons will listen, I don't know. We'll see. I
feel
doubt
like
they'll listen.
I feel like there are a few out there that we're gonna reach, and it'll make all the abuse worth it when we can elevate their game. Like there's a few open-minded, like the story they tell in church about the kid that's like chucking the oysters back into the sea because they all washed up on the beach. And there's like a million of them, and an old geezer walks by and he's like, "Kid, you can't make a difference for all these oysters." And he's like, "I can make a difference for this one," and he chucks it out there. So, props to I think it's rule of Thule. It may be rule of Tool. I'm not sure if the th is a th or not, but so I posted this. What are the benefits of pause time, and if it's so great? Why do you guys defend it to the death? And most of what I got was vitriol. And there was one in particular that I called him at one point, and maybe this is what you're talking about with the heel turn. I called him Grognard or Gronyard GPT because you just type one sentence and 4 screens of text would show up over and over again. And as Jeffro says, the anger is the tell, right? So there are people that are getting legit upset about this. And it's funny because the same people that'll lose their cool will also be like, well, it's just Elf Game. I don't know why you're so mad. It's just Elf Game. I blocked BrOSR on site, but it's just Elf Game. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get to the example. So Rule of Tool put together like the best arguments that he saw out of that, and he was picking out stuff. I don't know how he caught it with all the bad, but the one of the bads that I was reacting to is this Alexander Lex Williams guy, this Squidlord. He was the Gronyard GPT. Although he's not one of the ones that wound up blocking me, so he's still staying in the tent. But his reaction was because sometimes I need to take a dump and my character doesn't, putting it simply. So this is one of those ones that I characterize under the dishonest objections, misunderstanding one-to-one time. I need to take a dump and my PC doesn't. And part of that is because you're not doing one-to-one digestion and it shows. But
is it, I mean, he probably wrote that tweet while he was on the toilet. So
I told him, dude, take care of that stuff before you get to game night. Nobody wants to wait for you to bomb out their bathroom.
Yeah, so he was doing a stinker tinker on that one.
So what do you say to people who just legitimately show they don't get it, and when you point out to them they don't get it, they lose their cool?
I usually will like put a reaction gif of a wrestler. That's what I do, because that's all that they really deserve on that, because it's just like nonsense. Like, what are you talking about? So on that one, it's like, okay, he needs to go take a dump. Like, what are you talking about? Did you think that we don't like when the players are talking about like which spell they want to choose at the table, which just is a constant annoyance to me. I even talked about it last time like 55 times.
Yeah.
Do you think that we're not pausing while they look it up? Like, that's what you think one-to-one time is. It's like,
exactly.
This guy's just, he doesn't get it at all, and he needs to focus more on his alone time and less on tweeting while he's on the toilet, where he might drop his phone in the toilet.
Yeah. So, but like I've got another example here that comes from a blog. One-to-one time doesn't make sense. It's unnecessary. I'm not going to say that word, and adds nothing. And he says, I've caught this will be a diatribe, so just wait a second. But I want to, there's a part I want to that sticks out to me. So This is from 2023 in June. I've caught imbecilic snippets from the BrOSR cult before, but largely ignored them for two reasons beyond their irrelevance. The first is that they are seemingly obsessed with first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, a game that I've never played. The second is that I've read a few pages of what I guess you could call the Founder's Book, Appendix N, and was confused how, despite pretending to be some sort of authority, he apparently doesn't know how wizards typically acquired spells. Besides intolerability, one of their shticks, I find it so hilarious that intolerability... Anyway, one of their shticks is trying to convince people that they must play the game as interpreted by them, which includes what can be accurately described as arbitrary, kind of, sort of, but not really, one-to-one timekeeping. From what I've seen them write, this is where they believe that for each day that passes in real life, a day also passes in-game, even though in-game time can pass more quickly and slowly than in real life. For example, combat rounds where everything's resolving actions takes more than 1 minute. I've also heard some of them state the one-day thing is only out of game, so in-game time passes ever quickly or slowly the DM desires, but once the game stops, every day spent not playing advances the in-game calendar by a day. So it sounds like you kind of got it, regardless of what the characters were doing or would want to have done during that time. As a discerning gamer and designer, I already knew that arbitrary, kind of, sort of, but not really one-to-one timekeeping is moronic grifter-grade BS from the start. And when I caught this question from Dying Breed Tabletop, I felt compelled to comment. And so you can see, once again, brain leakage, even back then, helping people understand. He said, to put it fully into grunt terms, the complex of houses spider hold together, i.e. deed all to hell, and occupied by the Mooge is the dungeon. You don't stop there unless it's fully cleared. So I'm not going to keep going on like this, but basically the thing that I want to come out of that is the tone. That the person starts off by saying, I've never played first edition. Like, that should have been, okay, shut up right there. Right? You don't even know what you're talking about.
Honestly, the geek doth protest too much. The BrOSRs are irrelevant. They're really irrelevant, guys. They're just not important, guys. I'm telling you guys, they're not important. He's like begging. He's trying to convince himself.
Yeah.
Even as we have the only D&D theory being discussed online at all right now, except for the 7,000th person telling you to take an improv class. We're the only ones that have any kind of discussion about game theory that is driving the bus. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a short bus, and Jeffro's driving it, as you might imagine.
It's like the Muppet Band bus, right?
Yeah, it's the Muppet Band bus where the electric whatever shock or whatever it is. I don't remember what it's called, but you know, I take offense to him calling us grifters. Jeffro's the only one grifting anything. Okay, he's the number 3 grifter in the world. I'm not grifting anything. I'm not selling anything. Look, I could use some cash. If there was a way that I could monetize this, I would be. But it just seems like common sense. It seems basic. So that's the number one thing about his tone. It's just. I remember that guy back in June. I do remember that blog post, and I kind of skimmed through it because literally no one's going to read every word of any of his blog posts. So I certainly wouldn't. But he doesn't get it. But then you start off on the foot of, I've never played this game, but let me tell you how bad it is. Like, the dishonesty of that is completely nuts. It just is, you know. And
on my how to play the BrOSR way this year video from in January, you remember I said, you know, one of the reasons to lift weights is because you need to get used to resistance, because when you start talking about these ideas, people come against you. And I pinned a comment because a guy starts going back and forth with me about how Jeffro's a grifter, and I should pull that up. I should pull that up. If I go to here, let me pull this up.
Oh, good Lord. This is the type of preparation we have on the Who is Dunder Moose podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, gentlemen. There's no ladies here.
There's at least two females that I know of have caught at least one episode.
Yeah, not this one. How y'all doing? Looks like we got Brown Wizard here.
Yeah, Brown Wizard.
Robert Stevens.
I'm talking about that, like, was open and willing to give it a shot, right?
Indeed. He was open and willing to have you insult his module. So he definitely has thick skin. You and James did that for 2 hours straight, and he just sat there being polite. I would have logged off if it was me, honestly. We got Robert Stevens, Robert Stevens helped let Cody finish his story. Honestly, I don't want to talk about One Time anymore. I want to talk about Cody Rhodes and how he's going to be able to finish his story because of Robert Stevens and all the good people of
Yeah.
St. Louis. So thank you, Robert Stevens. My kids were going to cry, and you helped fix it. They're going to be pumped this WrestleMania season. It's going to be awesome. Thank you,
Robert
sir.
Stevens is hard to play with. He will crack me up like no other when we're playing in Trelopulus. But let me just and you know I'm.
Are you ready now? Are you have your
Totally ready.
preparation? Okay.
Okay,
I
it's on the
told you
screen
maybe you
now.
should prepare. I know you're doing a Twitter fast, but do you have to do a preparation fast too? Is that part of this?
This is my only shot at Twitter and YouTube. I'm at my laptop.
All
Don't
right.
deny me this. All right. A user named Cola CP says you have the false premise that D&D is based on Appendix N. It's not. That can be proven easily. Gygax didn't create D&D. He published it. He stole credit for it. All right. So I came back. I was like, is the way you play tied somehow to your identity? Would it be a personal loss to learn how the BrOSR does it? Why reject a path to improvement before you understand it? Reading 1E would help you see that Jeffro is not playing Raw. This is an issue because he claims to do so. That doesn't even parse. Reading the book doesn't help you play rules as written. He tells many lies, but that's a good place to start. But 1E isn't very good, not even for its time. 2E is an objectively better and more popular system. Even better games than D&D exist made by other companies. You shouldn't be married to any one system. Blah, blah, blah. If you want to get better at D&D, you need to play with a wide variety of people and a wide variety of games and systems.
Well, okay. What do you want me to tackle on that one? We can tackle 2E. 2E probably was more popular, sold more copies and stuff. That's probably objectively true. I don't know. But
Yeah.
as far as being better, I mean, we've all read it. I think Jeffro did a tweet thread on the DM advice in 2E, and it was horrendous. It was horrible. It was like, oh yeah, just do whatever, just wait till your PCs almost have one hit point left, and then let the monster die. Yeah, do that. That's cool. So 2E is not better, at least as far as the advice. The stats itself seem pretty similar. I ran 2E a bit, so I don't know. I think it was pretty similar to 1E in some of the combat ways and stuff, but.
Yeah. Well, my problem is I just don't care about 2E. I'm sure it was great. I'm not fascinated with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And it doesn't have the secrets that were lost. Or if it does, it's a diluted, one step removed from the creators that both got kicked out of the company kind of thing.
I think that's fair. Yeah, based on what I remember from 2E and some of the theory analysis we've done of it, I think that's probably true.
So basically, I tried to sum up the guy's his diatribe. I said, let me make sure I understand your advice. It's 1, to play with a wide variety of people, but not Jeffro or the BrOSR. And a 2, wide variety of systems, but not AD&D 1E. But actually 3, to make my own D&D. I said, remember how Harry Potter felt when Malfoy told him he didn't want to go making friends with the wrong sort? Well, that's me and your Malfoy. Jeffro and I already rode in the car having fun together and traded cards and ate chocolate frogs and everything. 2, AD&D 1E system I'm most interested in right now. Not taking anything from other systems. I'm sure they're fine. And 3, I don't want to design my own game. I want to replicate at my table the absolutely off-the-wall, over-the-top, massively multiplayer DC Marvel crossover campaign-shattering hijinks that the BrOSR have rediscovered that originally set the world on fire and that challenge you down to your core so badly that you would rather argue with some no-name rando Chandel with under 200 subs for fear that he might play in the one way out of all the varied versions you recommend that you can't abide. So maybe that was an overreaction on my part. Maybe I am totally like going.
Oh, you've gone, dude. You got mustache power. It's the heel mustache power.
So why is 1E like the anathema, and why can't I play with Jeffro, and why is 1 time so threatening?
I mean, there's a couple of reasons. They're grifters. They want you to buy their PDFs. That's one in some cases. That's like Pundit and those guys. Number 2, they've tied it to their identity. I mean, you touched on that. That's a big part of it. The idea that you tell someone that they've been doing something wrong for a really long time, they just feel stupid. They don't want to admit that they've been stupid, and they've wasted time. What do we got here?
Yeah, Keith says best selling means best. Everyone knows McDonald's makes the best hamburgers around.
Yeah, Tui is the McDonald's of D&D. Yeah, that makes sense.
And Brian Renninger says Jeffro used dice. Now they can't use dice.
I would love if they don't use dice anymore. Then they would stop talking about this stuff and leave us alone. But yeah, you went off on him. I'm going to judge your heel game of D, basically. You talked too much. You said too many things. And then you referenced Harry Potter. What was that? What the hell were you even talking about?
It was a waste because he admitted he'd never even read Harry Potter. So I'm just like,
I've never read Harry Potter. That's a positive thing that he hasn't read Harry Potter. What are you talking about? Good Lord. What are you 40 years old? You read Harry Potter? Stop.
Yeah, to my kids, bro.
I mean, Jeffro hates Tolkien, but I'd rather hate Tolkien than love Harry Potter. Good
will
Lord.
admit, I had a bunch of people, including Jeffro, on an episode, and I started it off by toasting. So sorry, Jeffro, I made you do that.
It's good that you made him do it. He needs to be a little bit humble and realize the professor is a good guy. He wrote a great series. He wrote a great trilogy. I don't even know what Jeffro was on about that week because I was trying to save Cody's main event at WrestleMania, and I succeeded. Thank you very much. So,
right on. What would you say is the number one bad faith cliche reaction you get when you talk about 1-to-1 time?
I think the thing where they pretend that they think it's like 1-to-1 in reality.
Yeah.
That guy with the take a dump it's a really stupid joke version of that objection where they pretend. It's like, okay, either you're pretending that you think that we can't go to the restroom or get a cigarette or go grab a beer or something, or you are a moron. It's one or the other. So it's like, okay, dude, you won because you proved that you can functionally not exist in reality. You can't like drive a car. You're so stupid. So yeah, you win. For morons like you, 1-to-1 time doesn't work. Congratulations.
So it came to that with this Squid Lord guy, and I pointed out to him, nobody defends the kind of thing you're arguing against because you haven't understood 1-to-1 time. You're arguing against something ridiculous because you don't get it. And Gorgon's Grimoire was the other guy in this debate, and
what did he say?
Well, he eventually blocked me, so I can't even show you what he said. But he said, even after anyway, I tried to make peace. I respected his years. I respected his opinions. I apologized if it came across that I wasn't. And it seemed like we reached this detente, and then he came out and said, "You're moving the goalposts," or that it was a what's the other one they call? It was a straw man argument, and I thought he was talking to Squid because I was like, it is a straw man to like argue against something that nobody's actually arguing for because you don't understand it. And when I told him that, I didn't realize Gorgon was telling me that it was a straw man, that I hadn't understood that he was trying to loop some crazy. You should be if you're actually committed to 1-to-1, you should be using it at the table as well as away. And they said, well, were the goalposts heavy when you moved them? I'm like, I haven't moved any goalposts. My original statement was that you haven't understood this in this life.
We have definitions of this going back to like 2020. For God's sakes, like
Chanticleer, it's in the DMG, page 37.
Yeah, Chanticleer is the one that really lined it up really easily. And if you read my my blog post on 1-1 time, it's like I quoted him and then kind of gave my own definition. I don't remember the details of it, but it was like, it's like away from the table, time passes at the rate of time of real life. Like away from the table. Look at that. It's beautiful. What a beautiful blog. Look at it. So simple. It's minimalist. It's great.
It's on dark mode, so it doesn't hurt your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dark mode. I only do light mode on Discord. Some people dunked on me about that this week.
If you go to page 37 in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I'm in the right-hand column. I'm about, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 paragraphs from the top. In the middle, in parentheses, Gary says, and it is best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening.
Yeah,
right?
It's not. Yeah, Gary said that. Chanticleer kind of elaborated a little bit, made it a little bit longer. It's like, that's what we've been saying since 2020. Like, the fact that these guys pretend that that's not what we say is completely nuts. So he's saying a straw man.
Yeah.
Or moving the goalposts when we never claimed that. I don't know. Sometimes we make jokes and we talk about 1-to-1 space. Like if you're going to go across ocean, you got to go get in a boat, like for real.
Yeah.
Like we try to make a joke of it, like to
It's like
say how
playing
stupid.
Pokemon Go.
Yeah, like how stupid these idiots sound. It's just ridiculous. Well, do you have any like real objections? Because okay,
All right. Well, yeah, let's
we've
go.
dunked on the geeks and the morons. We can move on to some stuff that might actually help the four
Well,
people that are listening.
I think the first honest objection is actually also a cliche. It's the most common question that can be taken as sincere. What if you have to end the night in a dungeon?
Okay, well, there's a lot of ways to handle that. That was the very, 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 very first thing that we came to when Jeffro talked about this back in 2020. It was, and I probably was the first one to come at him and give him objections to it because I played devil's advocate for all the stuff that you'll see in his book.
Yeah.
All the people that he's probably going to pretend to argue with in his book were probably actually me in 2020. So he's probably going to be like, oh, some people might say this, but he means by Dubs said this. And I had to contradict him because I was just trying to like help him figure out why it might not work or how we can fix this or that, because we were all a little bit mixed up with it at the beginning. I
remember that.
Yeah, he would remember that because it was probably 6 months of grueling torture. And that's why he dropped out of the BrOSR chat, because he can't take the heat.
Was he relieved when you started your own game and left his campaign?
Oh no, he kept like begging me to come back.
Of course.
He was like messaging me. It was like an X. It was horrible. Oh my god.
Like me, when I was like, you need to come back on my channel. I need a pop. I need 6 more.
Yeah, you're gonna get your 6 more after this. You'll be at 205. You'll be taking over the world, my friend, with your 205 listeners. But so the dungeon, resting in the dungeon, there's a lot of ways to deal with that. First off, you just tell the players, look, this is how it is. You got to find a way to escape. That's the first option.
Yeah.
Second option is you say, well, if you want to rest, the next game is on, a week, 7 days, or if they spent like 3 or 4 days shopping, then it's 4 days away. If they spent 3 or 4 days shopping in session, then, let's say they started on Monday, but they actually delved on Friday, their next session is the following Monday. So, they have that 3 days. And then you just do random encounter checks for 3 days. Most likely, if the DM runs those just on his own, you're probably going to end up dead. You can also downtime those. If your players are extremely online, like most of the Bdubs players, you can basically be like, okay, you rested in the dungeon for 3 days, and here's the encounter checks. What do you guys do on this one, this one, this one? And then the DM, if he has the energy, inclination, the time, blah, 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 he could say, okay, some orcs come to you and say this. What do you guys do? And you could do that like on Discord, online, or on chat, or whatever. Now, I would not necessarily recommend that unless you just, don't have a full-time job, or you just really, really love this stuff and you just want to do it all day, every day. But you could do it. It would be workable. And
it's a better use of your time than arguing with fools on Twitter. I'll give it that.
I mean, yes. Rather than talk to DMGPT or whatever you were talking about, that guy, you probably would be better off to running random encounter checks for the guys who decide to sleep in the dungeon at the end of the session. Yes. Another thing you can do is, the players have to find a solution. That's my thing. I made a tweet about this the other day of like, I don't want to tell the players what to do. Like, I have some ideas on how to handle this stuff, but I don't want to tell them because they should come up with the solutions. And
that's right.
Yeah. So, and I'll go ahead and explore one before we get deeper. Let me see if this guy's Brian Renninger. We handle die in the dungeon. TPK is perfect for one time. Yeah, you can die in the dungeon. You could just tell them you're dead. If you don't get out of the dungeon for the end of the session, you're dead. That's another option. That's the harsh option.
Our last session in Trilopolis, we the party got split, and like the 6 of us that went down the elevator did wind up just getting butchered by orcs. So it puts a bow on the end of the session for you.
Yeah, Brigadine told me about that because he's in every single campaign that exists in the BrOSR. So he told me all about going down the elevator. He's like, yeah, we went down the elevator, we're dead. I was like, dang, oh, that's harsh. It was Appendix A, I guess. That has some harsh traps.
Yeah.
But so here's one solution that happened in Bdubs, and you labeled this YouTube receipts or whatever. Here's one solution that happened in Bdubs. We had a dungeon that was high level, and I made sure everyone knew this was going to be a high level dungeon. The way I described it and the stories and all that type of stuff. was like, you're going to see some crazy stuff in there. And I don't remember all the details, but this is the dungeon of the Sorceress Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've read Dubs Run Session Reports, you know that she's been that dungeon and that NPC has been the focus of probably about 12 sessions or so of the 100 and something I've played. And the patron, Kyle O'Connor, was like, I need people to go into that dungeon for this XYZ MacGuffin, this story MacGuffin thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he spent some months just building a forward operating base like 1 hex away. So instead of the PCs having to travel like 20 miles to get there, they only had to travel like 3. So they could go from his base that he built as a patron, like he spent his months doing it, and he could go straight to the dungeon and come straight back to his base. So that's one solution as well. Like if you have patrons or PCs that have leveled into name level type play or patron style play, they can start thinking things out in more of a long-term way. And he realized that particular MacGuffin, that particular quest was so important to him that it was worth the long-term play to try and egg PCs into getting out there, because he figured this dungeon that's 20 or 36 miles away or whatever it was, there's no way these guys are going to do it, because they know it's high level and they know they have to travel overland 6 hexes or whatever it was to get there. And nobody's going to want to risk that. It's just too much. So that's another solution. This is the thing, is like the players themselves have autonomy in these games. In these BrOSR games, they have autonomy. They have to figure out ways to deal with this stuff.
How long do you think it takes new players to this kind of campaign to start thinking along those lines?
I mean, it varies. For the elite players, maybe 2 or 3 sessions.
Yeah.
For everyone else, they just never know. They just never figure it out. Well,
it depends on who you're playing with too, right? Like you can have one experienced guy and he will do something and you'd be like, oh, yeah, you totally could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to think that people get into these games and they're like, all their D&D dreams that they ever had, like whatever it was that they always thought when they were first introduced to D&D when they were in like middle school or high school, that like, man, this is what the game is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then they play a conventional game with variable yo-yo time. And they're like, well, this isn't what I was promised. This sucks.
Yeah.
This is terrible. So they get in one of these games and they're like, oh, I can do it now. I can do the thing. Like I can build the army. I can build the castle. I can claim the wilderness. Like those are things that are going to happen. And these guys that come with their conventional games and they say, oh, in theory, you can do all the things you were promised in middle school or high school when you were introduced to D&D. But in real practice, they don't. It does not happen, because we've all experienced that. Every single one of the 5 people listening to this podcast, of whoever Dunder Moose is, has been promised one thing when they were in middle school and high school, introduced to this game, and spent years not getting the thing they were promised. But the BrOSR is giving you what we promised. And it all comes, starting point, foundationally, from 1-to-1 Jeff Rogaxian time.
They can make the argument that the results we're having could be achieved in their game style, but the fact of the matter is the rules that you use will funnel you towards certain behaviors. And stuff that doesn't make sense for the rules you find yourself stuck in, you don't even have the mental vocabulary for them. Like technically, I guess it's possible. But having 1-to-1 will generate these decisions that people need to make. And the thing you said about building a point right outside the dungeon, that's one of the things. Purple Druid is in the chat. One of the things he and I talked about. Well, I want to save his for later, because I feel like it's not good to bring up his when we're talking about the cliche.
Oh no, it's great to bring up something that you're not going to talk about. That's top hosting right there.
No. This is YouTube. You tease it and then it keeps.
Is that teasing? People. Is that like a promo?
Yeah, it's like a promise. Like if I listen longer, I'll hear what they're talking about.
I'm sure all of
these 5 people
all these 5 people are going to stay up to hear Purple Druid's quote. That's they're all with bated breath over here.
All right, let's get to the second dishonest objection that I came across. And it's let me put it back on the screen. It was actually Gordon's Grimoires, which I'm grateful that Rule of Tool actually took screenshots instead of quote tweeting because I can actually read it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Rule of Tool. The Rule of Tool actually makes me think of like the band tool. So the Rule of Tool must be like you can't use 4 at a 4 time.
I'm picturing the bike rack on the back of a truck.
The Rule of Tool, yeah.
I don't know. It says Gorgon's Grimoire says you play how you want and I play how I want. And then he just goes on to describe his own system that's like neither here nor there with
that
one-time
no one cares about.
Yeah.
No one will ever read what he wrote, ever. Including us. It's right there on the screen. No one's reading it. They're all trying to put their next zinger in the chat right now. They're not reading it.
The chat's pretty lit. I'm not going to deny it. But so I think the you play how you play, I play how I think that comes down to the cliche of as long as you're having fun, it counts as D&D, right? Like as long as you, I do as thou wilt. I don't know how you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't necessarily want to talk about the Luciferians, but yeah, there's the Luciferian aspect to these variable time people. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Do as thou wilt will be the whole of the law. Yeah, that's the OSR guys are all libertarians or normie libs, or and deep down that means Luciferian. Don't define the world for me. And we talked a bit about that, and me and Rolling Bones talked about that. The much better podcast, Main Event, Rolling Bones. But
it's all right. It's okay.
He's maybe he'll bring me back one day, and maybe I'll pull a Jeffro and just talk about swing dancing for 45 minutes while the whole chat gets angry and wonders what is happening.
Or you could do like he did with T-shirted Historian, and he just drops off, and you have to carry the show.
Yeah, good luck, buddy. You just carry this show without me. Sometimes when you're hearing particular guests, you almost wish that would happen, honestly, especially with Rolling Bones, because he can really deliver. He has a lot of interesting things to say.
That's true.
Unlike some hosts, of which for some reason I'm appearing a second time on. But
some of us have to grow a mustache to appear more interesting.
You're interesting, all right. It takes the focus off the gap in your tooth. That's actually what it accomplishes.
Yeah, evil couldn't jump this gap.
What were we talking about? What were we talking about? I'm totally lost.
We were talking about the idea that as long as you're having fun, it doesn't matter what the rules say. Which I think is funny because we mentioned that it does seem like a rejection of authority. Who are you in your rule book to tell me how I'm going to play at my table? But I find the irony of that is that the DM who has those feelings tends to rule his game with an iron fist.
Yeah, James Streisand or Gelatinous Rube or whatever you want to call him, he touched on this recently.
I like Ash of Creativity because it makes him AOC.
Yeah, AOC. Yeah, AOC touched on this. He touched on this recently when he was dealing with Gray Mage,
yes,
who is much worse than our best buddy that we have in the chat right now, Brown Mage, who's hearing us out and probably making better modules that won't get reviewed horribly by Dunder Moose podcast. Gray Mage was just trying to gotcha AOC the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, there's this gray area. We can play however we want, man. And it's like, no, there's certain ways that are better to play. And the BrOSR has discovered the only good way to play D&D. There's no better or best way. There's a good way and a bad way. The conventional players are playing bad D&D. And any of us with an IQ above a kumquat have sat down at tables and been like, this sucks. Like, I like hanging out with my friends. In some cases, they're like, I enjoy the company I'm with. I enjoy the drink I'm having. I enjoy taking cigarette breaks. I enjoy, whatever these people are doing as part of the gathering. I enjoy the pizza
dump in the middle of the game.
Yeah, I enjoy the pizza we ordered. Stuffed crust is great. But the actual game itself, they're sitting there going, why isn't this working like I was promised in middle school or like I was promised in high school? Why isn't it working? And the answer is one time. So they can say, don't tell me how to play my game. But like Gelatinous Rube discovered, or said and wasn't able really to say it because Gray Mage just kept yelling his like whiny voiceover on top of him. They are trying to tell us how to play. They're just trying to do it in a sneaky way.
Yeah.
They're just trying to be like, we are brave enough to have the courage of our convictions and say, our way's good, your way's bad. That's how the world moves forward. That's how reality moves forward. That's how men have discussions. But these guys are so effeminate and weak and pathetic and just like sap, just kind of like, it's just horrible. They're just this weak stuff that just can't just say what they want with strength.
I've talked to people face to face that they get turned off by the idea that there's one true way, or that one way is right or the other. And I've tried to explain to them, it's like, when you hear people say that, they're not just speaking in generalities about stuff they've guessed. There's people that have played pause time, and then they played this, and they're speaking from their own experience, that one of them is compelling and that they think about when they're not at the table, and they have shower thoughts and they make plans, and they can get rewarded for planning outside of session. And the other team just ends on a cliffhanger, and they just have to, everything is just, you're not playing when you're not playing, and that's the problem.
Look, there's a really important aspect of this, and that is, at least as long as you have that mustache, don't talk to me about your shower thoughts. I don't want to hear it. I don't want you to talk about that. Let's just
You should just be glad I take showers.
Look, that's for you and your wife to deal with. I don't need it. This is not smell-o-vision. But yes, there is one time, and BrOSR Play has people thinking about the game all the time. Conventional play and pause time has people forgetting it literally the minute they get in their car to leave. It's not even a debate. It's a fact. It's a reality. And we've all experienced it. So when they come to us and say, oh, you don't know enough about variable yo-yo time to talk about it. Dude, we've all played it. Everyone's played it. It's a ridiculous argument.
It's the default setting.
All right, who's talking here? What is
so
going
Macho
on?
Mandolf says, a fundamental blind spot of conventional play enthusiasts is that they only have one thing happening in their story game. So time and the rules has to be secondary to giving that thing its due. Whereas with one-to-one, so many things are happening that you can easily afford to handle them in downtime, or just let them go entirely, and you'll still have something interesting to do in session.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's always something going on. And it comes down to what I talked a lot about on Rolling Bones, of like, you kind of grab the things that really have heat, you go with them. And sometimes it's not what you'd expect. Sometimes the players are more excited about the couch or whatever. What was the couch that was in the Battle Bronze team?
Yeah, the couch from Jeffro's parents' basement.
Yeah, the Naugahyde couch. Yeah, that was the like, you don't even realize what the players really care about until they tell you by like their actions. So
by this couch I rule. That's how it worked out. You can ask Robert. I feel like the other thing that's crazy about it is that the DM it's not an equal power situation in any table where between the DM and the players. But in a one-to-one time scenario, the players are much more on a level playing field with the DM versus a variable time. Because in variable time, you have to ask the DM, okay, can we skip forward now? Or the DM tells you, okay, we're pausing, and nothing.
Yeah,
gets
bring
to
up.
happen.
Can you bring up Kyle's last comment? Yeah, there we go. This one. Go ahead and read that for anyone who's like driving or whatever.
Yeah. In one-to-one, the world is turning. Time is the most important resource. Is this worth my time is the question.
Yeah, and I think that was one of our initial selling points on patrons, because we had a lot of people reach out and say, okay, when patrons first became a thing, like, oh, why wouldn't the patron just do everything? And the answer was basically, which we've come around to maybe like reevaluating this answer, but the initial answer was, it might not be worth their time, and Kyle's one of the big patrons in Dubs Run, so he kind of knows what this is. Like, sometimes it's like, this isn't worth my time, because you start looking at the calendar and like, I need, 10 days to do this military march. I need a month to gather my forces, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it starts being like, okay, I need PCs to do something. This little thing over here is where the PCs come in. So one time is like, it makes it a resource in a way that time is a resource in reality. Like, you're going to run out of time. You only have so much time in the day to do things. And like you were saying, you were just rambling on of having to basically beg the DM. What happens, and really the DM doesn't care as much about the begging because BrOSR DMs get begged for skip time or whatever. But what players actually run into more than begging the DM is begging the other players, because you have a table of, let's say, 5 or 6 people. The fighter wants to get his troops on the march. The wizard wants to get out to the dungeon. The thief wants to steal the thing. And they basically have to beg each other for time to do anything that their class would do normally. The thief has to beg off, like, oh, just give me 5 days, guys. No reason. Don't worry. I'm going to go burgle a house, but I'm not going to tell you that. It's like, but then you have to like convince the players. But what happens in real human behavior, real behavior between men, is the thief player just say, you know what, I don't want to slow down the session for you guys to wait for me to make that roll or whatever. So what ends up happening with variable time is nobody is doing the class specific type stuff like hiring troops, burgling a house, spell research. I mean, I could go on and on. We all know what this type of stuff is.
Yeah.
No one does it unless they can beg off the other players. And that sucks because they're not going to do it. In real human behavior, they're not going to do it. And these DMs that are running one-to-one time, they're probably forever DMs, and they don't realize that aspect of it because they don't sit in the player seat and realize they're sitting there. When you're sitting there as a thief and you're saying, man, I haven't robbed anybody ever. Yeah. All I do is go into dungeons. It's like, that's not what this class is. This class should be, you're the assassin. I've never assassinated anyone because I don't have time. Like, what this class is just a weak fighter. It's just a crappy fighter if you can't assassinate people.
That's right.
One time puts the classes back where they should be, being able to do the things that they're supposed to do. So what's Brian Renner just saying?
Well, it is so load bearing that people that try to figure out in their head what it would do to use it or not, they cannot possibly simulate all the second and third order effects that it gave the game without actually playing it. What Brian is saying is they complain that real time is both slow but also too fast. What it is relentless, unquestionable. Being both too slow and too fast is actually a strength of one-to-one time. And he says thieves rob the party if they're playing their class.
Yeah, of course. They better. They'll get a bad grade. Good Lord. Yeah, me and Skylar Hernstrom did that last time he played. That was like the last time he did it. They got him to where he could level, and I trained him. So it was because we didn't want a bad grade.
Yeah.
We're like, you got to rob people, man. You're a thief.
I tried it my first time with foam in downtime, and he wound up getting caught on a pickpocket and thrown in the jail. So,
well, that goes back to Jeffro. Just loves to jail people. That's his deal. He loves to throw them in jail. You guys talked all about that before, but yes, time is relentless. Time is relentless in real life. Okay, you're chilling. You think it's taking forever. When you want something, you think it's too fast. When somebody in D&D, like in real life, but in D&D. You think it's too fast when the army's marching towards your keep, Straight to jail. Jeffro, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. That's Jeffro, man. He'll send you straight to jail. But yeah, I agree with Brian completely. That's yes. And then the objections to one time go from both ways. It's like, oh, it's too slow. Oh, it's too fast. Like, what's your point, guys? Because you can't even agree on if it's too slow or too fast.
All right. How about another honest objection?
Let's hear it out.
This one goes along the lines: pause timing gives you more flexibility for unreliable schedules. I'm not saying this is a correct, but I'm saying it's more of an honest question. They say it's hard to get people together. Real life gets in the way. What if an emergency occurred in the middle of a session and everyone had to run?
Let me see if I can understand. He's saying, what if like you're in the middle of a session and like a real life emergency happened?
Yeah, that was the most recent one I saw on Twitter, where like I'm guessing like a tornado alarm or fire alarm, or somebody gets a call that the police are at their house and they need to go home and deal with it, or something like that, right?
Okay. First off, that's really, 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 really rare. Okay. Second off, if it's one player, it's basically the same thing that a variable time player would do if they paused. If you paused at the end of a session in a dungeon, right? And let's say Bob Bob doesn't come back for session 2.
Yeah.
What are we doing with Bob's PC? Bob the fighter in session 2 because we paused in dungeon. What are you doing? You're going to teleport. You're going to teleport Bob the fighter out by some crazy Deus Ex Machina, or you're going to have
him.
Yeah, you're going to have him, or you're going to have him follow the party like an idiot and like, don't do anything or say anything.
The weekend at Bernie's option, right? Where you just
or
him around.
Yeah, or you're going to give him to another player to PC. One of those 3 options is going to happen. Guess what's going to happen if Bob, in the middle of a BrOSR 1-to-1 time session, has to leave very suddenly because he has an emergency at home? One of those 3 options. Those are the same 3 options in session. Bob says, "I got to go, guys." You say, "Okay, don't worry. Joe will run you, or we'll have you follow like Bernie, or you just teleport it out." So you're going to be in the exact same place in a BrOSR 1-to-1 game as you will in a yo-yo time game, variable time game. The difference is you're going to have all this other cool stuff going on that we've already talked about with the robberies and burglaries and blood in one time, people building castles and da-da-da-da. So it's like you're going to have the same problems in that case, in that very, very unique case, by the way.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I've got a player, we had a player for a long time in Dubs Run, Gaius, and he worked at night, and he would play while he was working, because his work was like such where he could, like, I'm not going to talk about what he does, but he could kind of be in and out, and he could like make his call on what his stuff was. And when he would just like get really busy at work and he couldn't be in there anymore, he'd drop out or he'd mute or whatever, somebody would just grab one of the other martial characters, would grab his fighter and run it. This is the exact same thing that happens if you're playing variable time and you pause and come back in a year and a half, like we talked about. So it's like, it's the same problem, but the positives are still better.
And the other difference is, instead of everybody having to stop and then the DM having to remind them what was going on, the players will tell Bob, "Oh man, after you left, it was crazy. Here's what happened, and then this other thing." And you as the DM can be listening to see what are the things they were excited about that happened last time, so you can weave it into today.
Yeah, man. When you jump back in a week or two later, because you will jump back a week or two later because it's a BrOSR.
That's right.
You will hear them tell him. He'll be like, "Hey guys, I'm sorry I had to drop out last time. What happened? Did I die? What's the deal?" And like you said, they'll start saying, "Oh, dude, you couldn't believe it. You did this, you did that," and then you'll have exactly what they love about that dungeon or location or point of interest, or even just the type of stuff that they dig. And if Bob is like mad, you'll know, okay, no more of that type of stuff for Bob. If he's excited, it's like, oh, more of that type of stuff for Bob the fighter. So it's like, there's no negatives to this that don't affect variable time as far as that particular objection. But what's the next honest objection?
Let's set aside the emergencies, because I said if it's like something big where a lot of things like everybody has to go, like a tornado or a fire, like you're in the middle of a battle with orcs and then like the fire alarm goes off.
Oh, you mean like everyone leaves?
Yeah, then you could just import that, like a fire has broken out in the dungeon and the orcs also have to run for their lives. There's many experiences of weather in the real world showing up in Trellopolis. Sometimes disastrously so for some characters.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The whole session having to be scrapped is extremely rare. I think in like my life of 20 years playing D&D, I think that's happened once. So it's extremely rare.
So the rare one aside, what about the more common objection that it's hard to organize people's time? If we don't pause, people may feel like they're being left out or missed out. It sounds like what you're saying, 1-to-1 time actually makes scheduling easier and real world interruptions easier to deal with as a DM than pause timing would.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's very obvious. If you're getting back to a city or some sort of safe point at the end of every session as part of 1-to-1 time, it's very easy to schedule, because if Bob can't show up next week, then whatever, he stays in town. The end.
Yeah,
it's not that complicated. Now, will you get some people that think, "Oh, I've been gone for a month and Bob's just been sitting in town for a month"? At first, I feel like that player might be like kind of dejected. "Oh, I didn't get to push the story point." But I think that's because they're going to be a person that has been brought up on conventional play, that thinks like this story beat, that story beat needs to be delivered. But when you explain to Bob, who's the new guy, like, hey, this just means you have a month to play with in town.
Yeah.
And he'll say, well, what does that mean? And you start to go through like, well, do you want to, you want to train a new weapon? You want to investigate this magic sword that you found, which according to James Streisand, you should be getting like one every 3 to 4 hours of gameplay. You need to just be packed up with magic swords. I think Gelatinous Rube thinks that you should just like have your backpack filled with magic swords just kind of sticking out. And they all need to be sentient, like talking to you. Yeah. That's what I understood from his recent argument with Grey Mage. But maybe I misheard. Maybe I misunderstood. I have trouble following Zoomer logic.
Well, maybe he just enjoys role-playing sword voices.
There's some good ones. We had, my game had a intelligence sword was, what was it? Dragon Slayer Dundee. That was a good one.
Oh man.
Yeah, I think that one got lost. I don't know. I think the player who had that got killed somewhere way off the map, so they don't know where that sword is anymore. I could be wrong.
Brig has one that sounds like Sean Connery.
Of course it needs to.
You pull a knife, you pull a sword.
Sean Connery's sword is a good one, yeah. So
Black Lodge Games in the chat says, we aren't running 1-to-1 yet, but ending in town already has benefits.
Yeah, that was what's the sandbox game they always talk about? The Jeffro will tell me. He'll jump in the chat. The one sandbox game that they always want to talk about, where it's like they're off on the frontier or whatever.
Somebody put that in the chat if you know which one he's talking about.
West March. Thank you. I knew Jeffro would know because he always talks crap about West Marches. West Marches. It was they always ended in town. That was one of the design forms of the campaign. I've read about West Marches. I've listened to podcasts about West Marches because I thought it was interesting. And one of the things is like, hey guys, we always have to end in town. And anyone who can show up when you want, blah, 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 we just always have to end in town. So it's like, even in West Marches, which did not use 1-to-1, it was useful, even with variable time. So yeah, Black Lodge is definitely right about that. He should switch to 1-to-1, and I think he probably will eventually. And I think there's 2 of those guys, so I think they'll eventually get around to it.
Well, that's why they want to switch to 2-to-2 time.
2-to-2 time. Okay, that's pretty clever. I like that. 2 days equals 2 days. Wait a second.
I had a thought and it just totally flew out of my head. Apologize.
Yeah, okay. That's what we get on the Who Is Dunder Moose podcast. Let's see who's here.
That's the level you can expect.
We got Brian Reniger in here.
Well,
story time with friends. Who is story time with friends? Who is that? Who is this guy? Story time with friends. Say something interesting we can talk about. We will talk about your comment. Can you do it? I've asked you to step up to the plate, my friend.
He can. The thing I wanted to say that I almost just lost again while you were talking about that was, nope, it's gone again. Crap. Oh, it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Oh, good Lord. That took like 20 minutes. What are you doing?
With my life. Oh, yeah, Alchemic Raker says 1-to-1 thinking.
1-to-1
I'm
one thought per one
processor.
day.
I'm an external processor, y'all.
1 thought per day is what that means. So you're already way outside you're way outside what you can do today. So it's okay. It's all right. I'm a 21-to-1 thinker, so I've got this. I've got you covered.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, Brian says blame the FDA. My problem is I keep reading chat. I'll have a thought and then I'll read a chat and then
stop reading the chat. These guys are just hecklers. They're just going on and on and on. Except for Black Lodge, who I've been very impressed with recently. I'm gonna read what he said. That we will try 1-1. You should put that up. There you go. We will try 1-1, but are running Axe 1 right now. And there's a timer on what is happening on level 2 of the dungeon. The sessions are going slow because we don't have the rules mastered yet. Yeah, I understand. I've run Axe 1, so I can actually speak to this from a expert analysis. I have an idea of what might be happening on level 2, but I won't spoil it from anyone. But it involves some crazy lady, probably. So, doesn't it always involve some crazy lady?
There are some, I think, that misunderstand the difference between the West Marches approach and the BrOSR in that I feel like West Marches says, okay, this is the rule. You have to end in town. Whereas I don't feel like BrOSR does that. I don't feel like a BrOSR DM says, well, you guys need to wrap it up. I feel like the players, knowing what happens if they're stuck in a dungeon, every time that I've played a BrOSR game, the players are the ones going, all right, guys, it's 11:45. We need to pack up our stuff.
Well,
We got
I've
at
literally
least two
done that.
overland checks before we get home. Have you ever had to corral them out, or will you just let them
Here or
end it?
there. Yeah, I tend to warn them if when that happens is when they start getting too much cross chatter on their planning. Like, oh, we should do this, we should do that. I'm like, guys, it's 11:30.
Yeah.
You know, we end at 12. That's it. You know, so I'll just say, hey, you guys do what you want, but you need to understand we're ending in 30 minutes. So what comment do we have there?
I think Ding Ging 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 says 1-to-1 time directly correlates to daily showers. Scary stuff for most in the hobby.
It's true. Based on what I've heard about these conventions, 1-to-1 showers is just not
Gross
how they
nerds.
roll. Yeah, that's not how they roll. But
all right, how about another dishonest objection?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll dunk on these nerds.
All right. 1-to-1 time was just a suggestion. It wasn't a rule in the book. And Gary later recanted. If you read his older forum posts, he didn't play that way. And I've been playing for 40 years.
Well,
that was
honestly,
kind of a
I mean, you talked about this in your BrOSR video, which I think was listened to by 20 people, including me twice.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I wanted to make sure I understood what you said. But, you know, it's really great that the BrOSR plays D&D better than Gary. It's really, I feel good about that. That gives me a positive feeling going to the day. When I wake up in the morning and I take my 1-to-1 shower, I think, this is great that I play D&D better than Gary Gygax. You know, I love the guy. He wrote a great book, but it's a shame he sucked at D&D. And it's a shame that he went to the gross nerds of a forum.
Yeah.
Of a forum, my friend. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the smell of all those forum people in one place? I can't. I don't want to. But there they are. And he goes there in his latter days.
Yeah.
To try and tell them that they are right. That his 1E sucks. It's honestly kind of sad if you think about it that Gygax went to a forum, I think it was Dragon's Foot, to tell them how awesome all of them were. When, if you scour that forum, and I did, because I like some of the stuff they said about the modules, it was just a big old parade of losers. And really, Gary, you should have been trying to win them over. And, you know, I pray he's up in heaven, but it's just, man, what a bad way to spend his last days.
I want to read the rules that he came up when he was still snorting the mountain of coke. I don't want to hear what he thought after the mountain was snorted.
Yeah, that's Jeff Rowe's thing. And no, that was actually James Streisand. That's James Streisand's like, man, Coke makes a better game. I guess it does. Who knows? I mean, when I've had a bunch of coffee, I probably DM better. I don't know. I tend to do worse when I start breaking out the downers, you know, the alcohol and stuff. So maybe Coke is the way to rock and roll. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm still not going to try it. What do you say to the people that I mean, what's behind the complaint? I've been playing this way for 40 years. None of my buddies back in the late 70s, early 80s ever played it this way.
Well, those are guys that just weren't in Lake Geneva. They weren't there.
Yeah.
They didn't know Gary. You know, it's a shame we were talking about the Blackmore documentary and how great it is.
Great.
And I just, you know, it doesn't seem like he asked them these questions. Would he have asked him these questions today if he was recording it today? I don't know. Probably not. The guy who made the Blackmore documentary is kind of mad at all of us. He thinks we're mean.
Well, I had him on this show, and he blocked me. He blocked me after I did my my How to BrOSR this year.
I mean, I might block you tomorrow. Honestly, this is not really the best
I got
experience
it coming,
I've ever had. So these questions, when I had to wait for you to find the question you were going to ask me, and I just sit there for 5
'cause
minutes.
You're just blowing my mind with all these gems you're dropping, man. It's wrecking my prep. I should have gone no prep.
No prep's the way to go. I did actually ask you to prep some of the tweets and stuff so that we could dump on some of those guys, but I think that their objections are so dumb. It's not even really funny. It's just sad. I'm kind of in a somber mood now, and I don't know if it's you, your ridiculous hat. Why are you wearing a vest? What is the deal there? Like, who wears a vest? What's the story? No, I told you no to the shower thoughts. I certainly don't want.
Anything else you want me to remove?
The mustache. Get rid of the mustache.
Of course. Robert says cancel Dunder Moose. Hey, asked and answered, man. Last time Dubs was on, the question was, how do you cancel a guy with less than 200 subs?
Well, you're over 200 subs now, so I want you canceled tomorrow, my friend. Look, the things I say on Twitter should get anyone associated with me canceled. I'm really disappointed that it's not working on you. Now that you have 200 people, maybe those 6 people that I brought you.
I think you wrecked my friendship with Gray Mage.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about right there. I did it. Gray Mage was on that debate with Gelatinous Rube, and it was just like, this guy is so insincere. He's just so ridiculous. He was talking about the gray area. I don't want to talk black and whites. I want to talk gray area. Dude, you don't write a rule book with gray areas. Like, it's black letters on a white page. What is going on, my man? Like, what is happening? Like, I don't know what he was talking about. It was very disingenuous. And I'm surprised that James Streisand, Gelatinous Rube didn't just start just saying crazy curse words or talking about his beard, honestly.
Well, the thing is, I think James is just used to being very direct with people. And I don't even think James was that awful with him. I think that the people that went back and commented after the video were probably more harsh against it. Like, felt like he'd lost the debate. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to adjudicate what all was going on.
What else you got? What else you got about one time?
All right. So here's another honest objection. Pausing. Well, maybe. I don't think it's in bad faith. I think it's incorrect. But pausing serves the story. You don't have to tie up nicely at the end of the session. We can have cliffhangers, right? We can run longer stories and montage the slow parts, although that's more of an argument for jump time than stop time. Player characters can take a long boat trip, and we don't have to set those characters aside for months.
Oh, yeah, the boat trip. Let's explore the boat trip, because Jeffro thinks this is a new objection, and he's wrong, as usual. Cliffhangers, I'll start with that. At my table, my local table, where I run, I was the one that kind of invented cliffhanger sessions, like for my table.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it a million times. I was really good at it. But I realized I was railroading people to get to the cliffhanger. Like, I was like, oh, it'd be a cool way to end this session, because I had kind of an idea what people might do. So I would cliffhang them. Was it cool? It's kind of cool. There were some good after session discussions over beer and stuff. It had some fun times. So I would always have a couple people that would hang out at my house after or whatever and talk about like what they liked about the session. So we had some fun conversations like, oh man, I don't know what's going to happen next session. But without fail, most of the table didn't come back the next session going, oh man, that cliffhanger, I got to find out what happened last year when we played. Like, it just wasn't very common. So the cliffhanger objection is kind of weak. I just don't think that's particularly good at gaming. What did Jeffro just share? I didn't read that, like most of his tweets.
I had Purple Druid. He was answering the last.
Oh, it's Purple Druid. What is
people that have been playing for 40 years, myself included, who did not play this way, most likely were not involved in the wargaming scene at the same time. They also don't do mass combat. There's a lot to that.
I think that's fair. Purple Druid comes at it from the mass combat stance, and I think one-to-one time and mass combat probably is a big aspect of mass combat is a big aspect of needing one-to-one time. I think that's probably true, and I think you'd find that the original Browns team probably was assumed that it was going to go down a one-to-one path with these war games happening around the College of Brownstein or whatever it happened at that Blackmore explored. The Blackmore documentary explored, but What were we on about before he jumped in?
Before he jumped in, we were talking about pausing conserve.
Oh yeah,
The
go into
story.
talk about the boat trip thing.
Yeah.
That was a tweet that somebody said that Jeffro thinks, and actually did a blog post about, that he thinks is a legitimate kind of new objection.
You know what? I'm really loving Jeffro's honest answers series on his blog right now. I
Yeah,
don't know if he gave up being a heel for Lent or what, but that's really been valuable.
we made a decision on the back channels. I'm going to be the heel this month. He's going to be the face. So
Okay,
we're trying to see if we can get
I
the
approve.
the OSR gross nerds, BO geeks to use basic human politeness. We're giving that a shot. Fair to Midland results. Thank you, Jeffro. Hashtag thank you, Jeffro. Thank you,
Yep.
Dubs. But yeah, the objection that he put on his blog was somebody who tweeted like, "What if you go on a long steamboat trip, like in a Call of
Yeah.
Cthulhu game?" So, and
Jeffro says I'm the nicest person in gaming. No, Jeffro, you're the third nicest.
third nicest. Here's the thing: it's kind of crazy he says that. I know he's joking around, but sometimes when you're extreme, you're actually true. He is really nice, because when you start to think about the guys who pretend to be nice, pretend nice is actually really mean.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are like, oh, you can just play however you want. They're trying to get you to waste your time playing junky games. That's not nice. It's wasting your life. It's wasting your time.
It is not compassionate to let people
No.
continue in error.
Yeah, that's basic Catholicism stuff right there, man.
Right on.
Yeah, it's not compassionate to be like, oh yeah, keep drinking yourself into a gutter, buddy. It's totally fine. 1-to-1 drinking.
Yeah. I'm okay. You're okay. You're not going to have to answer for this.
So yeah, Jeffro's nicer than those guys, even though he's a Protestant. It's fine. We're still okay with him. Generally speaking, he needs to submit to Rome. But what does Black Lodge Game have to say?
Oh, this is jumping back a little bit. They said cliffhangers are easy to make happen if you play with midwits. Once you have schizos at the table, it can't work.
I have anything to add to that.
True that.
Except I'm a schizo, and he's right. The steamboat thing. Let's talk about the long steamboat trip objection.
I think that came about because of the Call of Cthulhu Masks of Nyarlathotep Bro that's coming up, right? And they said in 20s you got this slow King Kong steamboat, and your characters are all there. How's that even supposed to work?
Well, I can tell you that I've already done that in BdubsR, because I've done everything in BdubsR that these morons talk about. So we already had PCs go out on a long trek that took like a month.
Mm-hmm.
And it was easy. It wasn't a big deal. It was no problem. Here's what you do. You run the trek. Okay?
Yeah.
You let it get back to someplace safe, and that's your session. And then they landed in the safe place on whatever date they landed in the safe place. And then you don't go back to those guys until that date.
Right.
And so if it started on January 1st, they trek. In this case, they trekked out to a wild wilderness, like woodland. They fought some things. They had some battles. They had a big army with them, so that's why it took so long, because they were slow marching. And then they got back. Let's say they left on January 1st, and they got back on February 1st. That's it. Those guys are out of play until February 1st. It's not that complicated. I disagree with Jeffro. This is a new objection. You can run the story of the steamboat trip on the boat. If there were some sea monsters that attacked them, or if the trip itself was really not that crazy, you can spend the other 2 hours of the session or whatever's left doing stuff in, wherever they landed, Rio or whatever they were trekking to.
Yeah.
And that's it.
In a sense, the boat is almost like another dimension, right? Like there's nothing that can happen and be communicated to them until they reach land. So you can just safely run that session all the way till it's finished, and then jump back and play the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
And then it all catches up. And this is something that if you do variable time, technically, can you still do that? Yes, but it gets so much more complex trying to remember who knew what when, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not that complicated. You just run it in session. You turn the trip into your session. And if you roll random encounters and you get nothing happens, then it's like, okay, the trip in game time took 5 minutes,
Yeah.
in world time took a month. And you say, well, guys, you're there. It took you a month to get there. What do you do when you get there? You have 2 more hours of play time. You
Yep.
play it out. They do something in town, blah, blah, blah. And then the session's over and you say, well, it took a month, so you can't go back to those guys for a month. So they got back to Rio or whatever it is. And, my session that I ran in Dubs Run probably had more possible problems that could happen because they went out into a wilderness and came back to a town that other players could have access to in the between time. And guess what? It didn't matter. No one cared. Nothing bad happened. It didn't break anything. It's
Right
such a
on.
non-issue. And the fact,
Well, I think it gets back to people that haven't played it trying to imagine in their head what it's like, and it's just too big. It's impossible. If you haven't played it, it's impossible to drum it up in your imagination.
Yeah, you just have to play it. Jeffrey talked about this. You have to play 1-to-1 to really get 1-to-1. And I would love for these geeks to give it a shot, not with me because I don't want to be around them, but with each other, geeking out.
Just
They
picture
can,
them all just sitting there, just all hate playing it, just like sneering and snide.
yeah, they can hate play it. They can talk about Harry Potter like you. Whatever. Just stay away from me. I'm not interested.
The other thing that came out from this that I want to talk about is like, what do people mean by the story? Because from one, the conventional point of view is the story is the thing that the DM has like prepped, that is like leaving the trail of breadcrumbs in the hopes that the characters will pick it up. Whereas like in a BrOSR campaign, the story is what everybody tells you when you missed the game night about here's what happened. The story is a past tense thing and not a future tense thing.
Yeah, I've seen this come up in things that weren't even 1-to-1 time, but were just more of like OSR style, like without railroading, of like the story in D&D is like the story of going camping. When you go out camping with your friends, you aren't like telling a tale while you're doing it. But like a year later, you talk about what happened. Oh man, Joe forgot the beer. So there we were. All we had was the Jack Daniels. We had to split it between us, and we got on the boat and we forgot one of the oars, and it got broke. And like that's the story. It's
Mike
after the
almost
fact.
shot that porcupine in the dark.
Yeah, dude. It's like you're not sitting there while you're doing the camping trip talking about like once upon a time we made s'mores. Like, dude, what are you doing? Are you talking to yourself? Are you narrating what's happening? What is this, like David Lynch's Dune? What is going on right here? So, no, the story is after the fact. You're totally right. And I had one objection from Matt Pungator, who's one of the writers for Kursova. And he came to me back in 2020 and said, oh, that's kind of postmodern. That's, to the story doesn't have any meaning until after the fact. It was a postmodern thing. I told him, well, there's some truth to that. But it's still like more like reality. It's like going on the camping trip. In a lot of cases, especially in the modern world, these types of lethal games or player autonomous games are the way that men can bond over tough situations that we just don't have. We don't have war, we don't have these things, and we have less of a social cohesion right now. So one way that nerds like us can kind of have a bonding experience is to have these things and then tell stories about them after the fact.
Yeah. All right, let's get to another dishonest objection. This one is kind of a just lumped BrOSR derangement syndrome.
Okay.
They elbow dropped on me, so I'm here to do the same. I'm not going to listen to the rules because somebody was rude to me. I block BrOSR on site. The ones I shared play every version except 1E with everybody except Jeffro. Or there's no one true way to play.
Well, they deserve an elbow drop. And they don't deserve to play with Jeffro. He's too good for him. We're too good to play with whoever these people are that are saying that stuff.
Have you ever dunked on someone and wondered if they really deserved it?
No, never. They always deserve it every time, without fail, without exception. Even when I come back around and say, "Oh, that guy, he actually, maybe meant what he was saying or whatever," it's still like he said it in a way that was dumb. You know,
Hmm.
I regretted the dunks on Black Lodge game because I was actually sick that day with a fever. So some of that stuff was nonsense that I was saying.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
I
didn't realize
think
until after the fact. I was like, man, I'm sick. What the hell am I talking about? I'm out of it.
too
I'm
much
out of
cough
it.
syrup.
Yeah, I think that was what was going on that day.
Well, I think that the dunk is in a sense a test, right? Like I feel like the reason that Black Lodge games, even though they were on a completely different track, I feel like the reason they have so much respect in the BrOSR right now is they didn't pout, they didn't block, they didn't run away and cry. They stood their ground and gave it right back. And I think both sides maybe came around on certain things because of that. And
Yeah,
it's like they earned their place at the table. And the dunking, in that view, it's not just being mean. It's not just being bullies to wimps. It's like testing to see who has the metal to earn a place in the discussion.
yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, you're seeing who's out there. It's a test of metal. It's a little bit of conflict to see who steps up, that kind of thing. But also Black Lodge had that Rolling Bones thing where he dumped on that one Kickstarter. That was funny. That was good stuff.
Yeah,
They were
Black
dunking.
Lodge's conflict is fun.
It actually is. I actually enjoy it. So if it's not clear from tonight, guys, I actually enjoy screwing around with people. So
Right
if
on.
I've ever messed with you and you thought I was being mean, and maybe I was going too far, and you think maybe I might regret it or whatever, just know that really, honestly, you deserved it, and I don't regret anything.
Jeffro says the dunking is a process of establishing a place in the hierarchy. Um, and then Macho brings us back to some of the thoughtful stuff with saying the long sea journey objection is a subset of the problem where PCs set out on a scenario that genuinely can't be finished in a session.
Okay, I okay, that's a new-ish objection. I've heard people say that sort of thing, but here is my counterpoint. I don't believe there's any D&D session or D&D concept that can't be delivered in a 4-hour session or more. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't believe there is. And here's the thing. We have to understand that we are basing the D&D was built off of Appendix N, which is primarily short stories. The grand majority of the stories that we are simulating are short stories. And one-to-one time, this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. It's been talked about a lot in the back channels of it's a way to take the amazing short stories from Appendix N, build your own, but then kind of tie them together in a serial, but
Yeah.
still have a single theme per session. That's why it's so easy to make a title for a BrOSR session.
Yeah.
Like you're never going to have a DM. It's like, man, I don't know what to call this session. What do I title this session report? Every session report is so obvious. Like my last one was Escape from Barsoom. It was like
Yeah.
obvious. What they did this session is they escaped from Barsoom. That's it. Because that was the story. Like you could have written that as an Appendix N short story. Like they escaped a crazy planet. The end. That's the whole story.
Jeffro.
Yeah,
The boobs of Opar.
The boobs of Opar. Every single BrOSR session is so easy to name because it's a self-contained story that if we never go back to the concepts of that session, it's okay. I love to have stuff hanging for next time, but you can almost look at it more like, like short stories or like 90s TV where it doesn't necessarily have to be completely serialized. It can just have like a general connection, like, oh yeah,
It's an
like,
episode of Power Rangers.
yeah, or like Star Trek or something where every story was self-contained. It didn't have to be a continuation every time. It would have a general continuation where it was a story about a war, and then 10 episodes later, you'd hear that they still were having the war. That's it. It doesn't have to be like we have the same guy from the same battle in the same war. It doesn't have to be that deep. So I think that I think there are no BrOSR sessions that can't be delivered, or BrOSR stories that can't be delivered in one session of 4 hours at least. I think, yes, Steven's objection that a 2-hour session is a little bit much, is a little bit too short, is probably fair.
We're still going to push that off. We're still teasing that. We're still trying to drag these last 6 people through the rest of the episode.
Good Lord. If they haven't
getting-
dropped now, they're never going to drop after how boring this has been.
I love you guys. Don't ever drop. The getting back to the dunking thing, though. What happens when people like me try to explain it in good faith in your experience? Like, have you tried it in good faith and that's why you became this bitter, twisted husk that dunks on everybody? Or were you just never going to do that?
I don't like explaining things to idiots, so no. I just don't.
Just not fun for you.
No, I don't see a positive to it. Like, the
So you're
idiot's
not
like,
volunteering to go to the old folks' home and teach them how to use their computers and stuff?
I could teach an old fogey at an old folks' home one-to-one time faster than I could teach these OSR nitwits. Good Lord. I could go be like, what's up, Ethel? Here's what you do. Ethel, here's 3d6. Start rolling. This is your strength.
Right.
And the one time, Ethel would be killing orcs within an hour while the OSR nitwit would still be yelling at me and still refusing to take a shower.
Oh man, I hope that when it's my time to go to a home that it's a D&D home. That would be awesome.
I'll send my kids to visit you in the old folks' home with their
I
dice.
like Ethel's chances. Okay, that's all of my dishonest objections. I've got one more honest one before we get to Steven's stuff.
Okay.
What if your players just don't want to? You've explained one-to-one time, and they're just like, we'd rather not.
That's a tough one. I mean, that's more of a social question, and that's going to be different per each group. There's some general rules of thumb you can use when dealing with a social situation like that. You can just tell them, like, guys, it really is going to work really well if you just trust me. Let's say 10 sessions. Give me 10 sessions.
Yeah,
you can try that. If that doesn't work, I mean, you can go back to conventional and just be like, okay, it's just how it is. We're just my group of friends. If these are guys that are your best buds and that's who you're going to game with no matter what, you might just have to sort of make the concession. I would say if they're that good of your homies, then come to them with, like, give me 10 sessions. And I think within 10 sessions, they probably come around. If they're not your best homies, then say, heck with it. I'll find somebody else. If they're online people, just say, who are you? I've already forgotten. I'm ghosted you already.
Yeah, I feel like the BrOSR campaigns that I've heard of are not hurting for people. That, like, it is new enough, even though it's been out for 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
It is novel enough that people will line up for these games. Would love to get a chance at them.
Yeah, man. We don't have any issue finding people to play, like, online. I know that there's some real life issues. I know Brigadine runs real life. Jeffro just said somebody's going to rage quit. I know Brigadine's lost one friend to the game. He's not lost his friend, but he's lost the gaming friend.
Yeah.
To just not want to run this stuff. And it wasn't one-to-one time that did it. It was some other stuff, like tech. Level Drain was the main one, I think.
Yeah.
And so there's some issues that come up like that. But yeah, let's get to Steven's thing, because looks like we're an hour and a half. I'd like to get to the Battle Bronstein stuff. I wanted to explore that a little bit here as an option for one-to-one time, if you are cool with that.
I'm way cool with that. So those are all the objections that I could list, both the good faith and the bad faith ones. Of course, the best ones that are out there come from us, right? So Purple Druid, World of Worth, he's got a ton of names. It's Steven. He basically in a blog post, I think it was a couple years ago even, said the two that stood out as being more difficult for one-to-one time are the one you mentioned. If you're only going to get a 2-hour session, it can feel really constrained, really forced to leave the dungeon and head back to town in the middle of that, because you've only just gotten to mapping and exploring and stuff like that. And the other one was, and I feel like he's got more perspective on this since he's been doing the Tannisborg, is how does one-to-one work with a mega dungeon?
Okay, I'll start with short sessions.
Okay.
2-hour sessions is probably too short. Okay. If he said literally 2-hour sessions, an early dubs run, that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. I think it was probably 3. And 3 was even a little bit short for most sessions. There are actually some sessions where 3 hours is plenty when players just want to kind of like look into the dungeon and then get home, or they get an easy score and they run. But yeah, 2 hours is just not going to do it. And I don't think there's any. I think that's a fair objection from our bros. The 2 hours too short. But as far as like how that relates to whether you should play 1-to-1 or variable, it's a non-factor because 2 hours is too short for a conventional session as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's really here nor there. It doesn't really have much meaning as far as that objection. Now, so I would say that 3 is probably the minimum. Now, as far as mega dungeons, I explored this the other day, and this is something that Jeffro kind of touched on but didn't really elaborate on years ago. Of a mega dungeon really should be a low prep thing, with the prep being maybe just naming the levels, like do a cross section, like we've all seen in the BX book.
Yeah.
And do a cross section and name the levels just interesting crap. You know, the Hall of Fungus, the River of Slime, the Mirror Tower or something. You know, like just whatever. Just make up some stuff almost as a challenge to yourself as a DM. Or your co-DMs if you're sharing the mega dungeon, and then the players can use the names of those levels to kind of riff at where they want to go and why. Like, hey, I've heard about this magic item, like the wizard. I heard about this magic item. It's a mirror, like it's a Vancian magic item I heard about, where you can point the mirror at the knight, and then it makes a reflection of him, and then he fights himself in the mirror. You know, like he can make up something cool like that, and he knows like, well, I need to go to the Tower of Mirrors level to do that. So then he can start like coming to the DM of like, here's where we want to go. I want to try and find a map in downtime to get to that level. So, and the DM doesn't necessarily have to prep everything. He just has to know they're going to level 4, the Tower of Mirrors level.
Yeah.
And you can almost low prep it and free ball it right there, like in session. So you can do a low prep mega dungeon that you can get to the levels quickly, not because they're easy to get to, but because people can do some downtime preparation on finding a map to a quick way to that level.
Yeah.
Now the DM, if he wants to build a mega dungeon from the ground up and like do all the maps himself, he needs to have some side entrances and stuff. But I think if you want to do a low prep, no prep, a low prep, no prep dungeon, do the cross section, name them, and then just let the entrances kind of create themselves as part of play.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
The link I put in the chat is actually to Steven's blog, because it lines up what he says. It lines up exactly with what you're saying. Is like cross-section mega dungeon, as long as it's well designed and there's multiple entrances where if you're higher level you can shoot straight down to level 4 or whatever. There's ways that you can make a mega dungeon work with the time frame that you have with 1-to-1.
Well, and there's a lot of player solutions too. Like I said, I don't really want to give players all the solutions, but the Red Nails comment, I think it was Brian Reninger, of make friends with the guys on level 2.
Yeah.
And the Fight On magazine for the OSR, I don't know if you ever read it, but the Mega Dungeon in Fight On is actually really fantastic. And on level 5 of the 10-level dungeon is a tavern. Okay? It's a tavern that is built into the Mega Dungeon of this adventurer who went 5 levels deep and said, this is deep enough. I'm going to build a safe zone right here. And it's a tavern. Yeah. And there's a lot of really cool NPCs in there. It's a great... I drop levels for the Fight On magazine Mega Dungeon, the Darkness Beneath, into a lot of my stuff all the time because it has great ideas when I'm in a pinch. But that level, I haven't actually used that level, but I have used the concept. In theory, no one's actually found this, but like 4 levels down, 5 levels down, you can have like a safe zone that has its own community, culture, whatever, that players can find.
You can put Elrond down there in his kingdom.
Right? Yeah, why not? And they can end their session right there. With 1-to-1 time, there's no reason why they can't go into the Drow darkness, Underdark, and make friends with the drow enough to just stay the night there for a week or
Mm-hmm.
whatever until the next session. So there's just all these guys are thinking of these theoretical problems when they could be thinking of theoretical solutions.
That's right.
So I am going to be right back. I'm going to grab a drink. If you want to describe Battle Bronstein to these 4 people, and I will
Sure.
be right back.
Happy to. I do. While he's getting the drink, I do want to point out, Purple Druid is specific to call it 1-to-1 downtime pacing rather than 1-to-1 timekeeping, and in the hopes that being specific will avoid the people that don't understand that this is not during session, that it's downtime during the calendar stuff. And Stephen, you can if I didn't do a good enough job expressing your point of view on that, please feel free to enlighten us in the chat. But moving topics a bit, so one of the cool, fun things that the BrOSR has been playing with for years, in addition to 1-to-1 time, is what happens with large, powerful factions if you put players in charge of them instead of having the DM try to run everything. And what happens is everybody gets really excited and the wheels fall off and DMs burn out, right? But in ways that people are still talking about years later. Oh, thanks, man. Purple Druid says, you did fine. Excellent to hear. So just earlier, well, was it the end of last year, Jeffro? When did you and BDubs come up with the Battle Bronstein in the back channel? Everything's a blur right now. The idea was, instead of having this always on campaign for the players and always on campaign for the powerful NPCs, the patrons, that we would just do a session for the NPCs and say, you know what, the players get all the attention the rest of the time. Players can take a seat. This is for the big boys. We're going to play for all the marbles, and we're going to just run this Bronstein. And so the first one, I actually got to take part in Jeffro's, which we just called it the Battle Bronstein. Again, these things name themselves. There were significant events, included the Red Kegger and the Charge of the Douche Brigade. Pretty awesome stuff. But it took about 6 hours, and we ran a Bronstein that totally changed the dynamic of what was going on in the game world that we had all been playing in for pretty much all of 2023. Like, I started in March. I know that the Who Caresville stuff started a little before I joined. But the idea is whenever the game gets too much equilibrium, where things get static, when players either get a problem they can't solve or things just seem to have their legs under them, then you have a Battle Bronstein. Bring the big time players in, let them do something to upset that balance, and then kick it back to the players for session play to try and restore balance to the world. And then it becomes like breathing, right? Like, whenever you need it, you can kick off this huge fun party. So,
yeah, I'm back, by the way. It sounded like you were going on and on about how you were part of Battle Bronstein, and yeah, Robert Stevens won the Trilopulus Who Caresville Battle Bronstein, which, congratulations to him. It's good to see he'll win. I like that.
I set it up for him. I handed him the throne by assassinating my main rival.
So let's talk about why. Let's relate this to 1-to-1 time.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's what people tuned in for. These 4 people want to hear all about 1-to-1 time and how you can solve maybe the problems it causes. So one of the problems of 1-to-1 time is it's cool that the people who really are engaged can just keep getting resources, can keep getting magic items, killing monsters, leveling in downtime or whatever. Mm-hmm. If the DM lets that happen, which in Dubs Run it does happen. But what do you do when you want to give them a real challenge? What do you do? Jeffro spent, 2022 thinking, oh man, I wish there was something could challenge Macho Mandoff. But no one could, because he spent 2 years, getting all this stuff, getting all these magic items, getting all these spells and this money.
Yeah. Which was addressed by Gary. If you hold the thought for just a second, on
Go ahead,
page
yeah.
38,
How did he address it?
page 38, the last section on time, before he talks about time in the dungeon, he says, you may ask why time is so important if it causes such difficulties with record keeping, dictates who can or cannot go adventuring during a game session, and disperses player characters to the four winds by its strictures. Well, as initially pointed out, it is a necessary penalty imposed upon characters for certain activities. Beyond that, it also gives players yet another interesting set of choices and consequences. The latter tends to bring more true-to-life quality to the game, as some characters will use precious time to the utmost advantage. Some will treat it lightly, and some will constantly be wasting it to their complete detriment. Time is yet another facet which helps to separate the superior players from the lesser ones. If timekeeping is a must from a penalty standpoint, it is also an interesting addition from the standpoint of running a campaign. And I think that's what happened, is the superior players just kind of flattened the game for everyone else.
Yeah, and we talked about this last time, what I thought in theory what the Battle Bronstein might mean. And I was just basing it off of my theory. I hadn't ran one, I hadn't played one. I just kind of heard about what you guys did. And it sounded like everyone had fun. It sounded like it was exciting. It was a good game design element. What happens, like you said, is the superior players that use one-to-one time in these games, particularly patrons, do sometimes flatten things out. And we talked about it last time, that you can have those conversations with those players and say, hey, this ain't working. This isn't making for a good campaign. But you also want to be able to give those players something fun to do as well. It isn't just, hey, stop. You're doing too much. Stop doing
I'm taking your toys away from you.
Yeah.
Now everybody's in who cares about.
Yeah, there has to. Yeah, exactly. Like you don't necessarily have to just flip the table on people. You can also offer them something. And I think the Battle Bronstein is one tool in the tool belt. And maybe it might be the killer app, honestly, because I really enjoyed what I did now that I've done it. Last time I was here, and I brought you 6 followers. So congratulations to me.
Thank you.
But I'm back. The BDubs rub. I'm back with experience in the Battle Bronstein. So what did I experience as the DM in the Battle Bronstein? We talked about on Twitter maybe getting my players in here to do a round table.
I love doing those.
Yeah, it'll be great, and you can invite them later. I'll tell you who they all are. But I didn't want them to steal my thunder, talk over me, their opinions. I didn't really want to hear what they thought.
Well, yeah, we did the same thing with Bro Oriental Adventures. First, I had Curator on, and he got to talk just as you're doing, and then we had all the players come on and share what it was really like.
Yeah, and what it was like from a DM perspective is I ran a Battle Bronstein. Now you all can look up my session reports. It was the last one. It wasn't the last one. It was the one before, and it was the Fishstein. I called it the Fishstein because it was just fishy. There was all kinds of fish themes in it, so it wasn't a Bronstein. It was a Fishstein.
Like a Dagon type thing.
It was a Dagon type thing, except our Dagon was Taylor Swift. I did not invent that.
That is so stinking BrOSR.
Yeah, it was Cathaler was her name. Did I invent that? No, my players invented that. So if Black Lodge James was to come at me that's really stupid, I'm very sorry, Black Lodge James.
Your Cathaler.
I'm very sorry, Black Lodge Games, that is so stupid. But my players invented this. I have to run with what the players invent. That's how it works in these games. So they invented that. So I had this situation, and I had a situation where there was too many elements. There you go. That's the link. So go there, you guys. Read it. It's great.
It's more in the chat too.
It's more of me. Chat. It's more of me thinking and talking. So I know you all love that. That's why you're still here. So
Robert says predicted the Super Bowl win.
Unfortunately, it did. I'm very, very sorry about that.
I knew the Super Bowl was rigged. I just didn't know it was you guys.
It was rigged by Bdubs.
Another reason to hate the BrOSR.
Yeah, you thought
I was pulling for the Lions.
You thought it was a Feds. The Lions weren't even in it. What are you talking about?
I know they were almost in it if they hadn't been written out of the script.
Good Lord. So let me describe my Fishstein. and what the situation was. Now, what does it matter? Why would I do it this way? Let's start with that.
Yes.
Why would I do it this way? Jeffro thought of this idea. Let's take all these.
Because you've been running, you never stopped. Like Jeffro kind of put the halt on his patrons, right? But you've been running this whole time.
Yeah. I kept going. I didn't halt my patrons. I didn't care.
But you still wanted to try the Battle Bronstein.
Yeah. What I realized with it when I heard what he did, and I heard you guys' podcasts on it, because I actually sat through these podcasts. I couldn't believe I did it, but I did. The one where you had
if you dropped out, that's like big percentage of my watching.
Yeah, that's like 50%, right? Your round table about the Battle Bronstein was really good, mostly because you didn't have much time to talk. That was the main thing. Robert Stevens talked a lot. Jeffro talked a lot. They were very entertaining. When it came back around to the host, I was like, oh, God, shut up. So I realized what we could do here is like, this is really cool. What you can do here is you take a situation that has a lot of chaotic elements, a lot of elements that you don't know really what to do with. They've built up over the course of a campaign. This will happen in a one-to-one campaign. You'll build up these elements. And for these elements where these patrons are starting to take over and can't be challenged, you can find a way to challenge them with this too, which is something Jeffro probably didn't think of, or at least didn't deliver on, because he already flipped the table away from Macho Mandoff. So here's the elements that were going on in mine. I had a PC named Billy who had taken over a town called Fishton. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then in character, in session, he went south and made angry this berserker guy.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Was it?
He says the douche brigade and Chithaler have to be related. Sorry, I shouldn't have read the chat.
I'm not gonna just even deal with that. That's just horrible.
That's too much player agency. That's
too much player agency. Let's not agency all that. Thank you very much.
All right, sorry. Back to your
So Billy was the mayor of Fishton. Billy's the mayor of Fishton, and he had another PC who was an elf who wanted an elf district in Fishton, and this was Standing Mountain. So Standing Mountain controlled one of the boroughs, and Billy was the mayor. But both of them went and ventured south just for the heck of it. They did some adventure that they came up with. It was this stupid weed thing where they went and robbed the weed giants. Okay. Well, and during the course of that, I randomly, no prep, generated a berserker, like from Broken Sword, who was in charge of the weed plantation. They burgled him. Brigadier's thief burgled all his cash. And I was like, okay. In conventional play, that would never come up again because the clock never moves. Mm-hmm. Okay. In most BrOSR play, it wouldn't come up again because the DM moves on to the next no prep squirrel. Like, oh, squirrel, let's chase that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to stop. Let's stop this. This guy has real resources and he's angry. Okay. In the middle of that, so he's like, okay, he wants to do something to Billy. Like something. I don't know. He wants to kill him. He wants to take the town away from him. He wants to do whatever. And then we have these are the different faction leaders. Essentially, when you run a Bronstein, a Battle Bronstein, you have your faction leaders. So far, we've got Billy, who's the mayor of Fishton, which is like a medium-sized town. The elf, Standing Mountain, who controls a borough there, who has his own drives and stuff because he's an elf. You never know what they're thinking. You've got the berserker, who's angry at Billy and wants some payback. And he never found out the thief that did it because the thief was invisible the whole time. He couldn't scry it, nothing. He never figured out the thief situation. He just blamed Billy for all of this. And when you do a Battle Bronstein, you kind of have to do that. You have to say, he's probably going to blame the guy who has some levels. He's not going to blame the level 1 thief that was able to skate, you know? Because he's going to think more like higher level guys. And then Kyle O'Connor had recently sent a contingent, like a couple of divisions of troops to just see what's going on in this town. Like, what is this town all about? What's going on? So he had a vassal there, which worked perfectly because it was about the right scale of power. Kyle O'Connor himself is really, as a patron, is probably too powerful for this event. But if you split off one of his vassals, it's probably about the right strength. And you can take one of his NPCs he created and turn it into a faction leader. which is
No,
what
so that's a similarity to Jeffro's Battle Bronstein. He didn't want any magic users. He didn't want anybody over level 5, really.
Okay, yeah.
So like there's a cap on how powerful the crazies can get.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you can do that, or you can do.
Was that a happy accident, or was that just an instinct you both had, or had you talked about that?
Yeah, Kyle had messaged me and said, "Hey, I want to check out what's going on there." I said, "Hey, you know what? This is going to take a little longer than you want." He probably did. He probably sent that guy over about a month before the fish night. I said, can you just slow your roll a little bit, and I'll give you something to play with here.
Yeah.
It'll probably be more interesting than us just doing it in downtime 1-1. So he said, okay. And so he got me his numbers on what he had. So, okay. So we got that guy as a faction leader. Now, in the meantime, we've got Vince McMaximus was running a new character who was a Florida man.
Of course.
He was a Florida man. And we all know that Florida men are a little bit crazy, and they can't avoid illicit substances, or they'll get a bad class grade. So he was obsessed with the weed giants and the berserker and all that. Yeah. And he had put on a magic ring that was cursed. It made him crazy. So he went running to the last faction that I had on the board was
Vince is here. Trabajo.
Yeah, there you go. Trabajo, man. Trabajo was the guy. He was a Cuban.
Trabajo's putting in some work.
Yeah, he was a Cuban Florida man. Day worker. And he went running to this cult leader. And because way back, like back in the summer, when the PCs took this town, when Billy took this town, they destroyed this cult of Cathaler. And they invented this during some sessions they played. I wasn't the DM. I wasn't there. I extract myself from all of it. I wash my hands of all the Cathaler crap. Okay? I just do. Because it happened. I wasn't the DM. I wasn't a player. I was nothing. But this was all no prep stuff they did.
Right.
So I was like, well, yeah, they killed the cult initially, but there's going to always be like an undercurrent. So I was like, there's one guy left with his like 3 or 4 people. So they had like basically like a thieves guild house of cultists. And they were trying to raise Cathaler back up as revenge on Billy. So anyway, but Trabajo showed up because he put on this cursed ring. So I let Vince run the cult because he was the only one with any kind of connection to it. All right. So anyway, let's go through our factions. We've got Billy, who's a PC. We've got Standing Mountain, who's a elf PC, elven spellsword PC.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a Berserker, who was an NPC that got given to a player. And then we've got the cult leader. I don't remember what the name was. I don't remember what he named him. But it was a guy, cult leader. He was a sorcerer or something.
He wasn't the Florida man.
He was a warlock who had kidnapped the Florida man. So Vince basically got control of the NPC that kidnapped him. Okay. And lastly, because we had like a twin city to Fishstein, was some troops that recently left another town who were a bunch of bandits that were pissed off. And they were like, this bandit king was sort of outside and considering Fishstein might be an easy target for him to take over. So that was like, that was another one. So anyway.
So the pieces are set.
So those are the pieces. Now, the thing with the bandits is like, that was a real thing that happened in downtime play of like this leader of this other nearby town couldn't pay her troops anymore. So they all rebelled. They tried to take the town, but couldn't. But there were still some of them left, and they had to do something. So I was like, okay, you guys might be near the fish town because it's only 12 miles away. Maybe you go over there. So I gave that to somebody. So basically, I gave all these factions to people. Mm-hmm. And people who were PCs, whose PCs were involved, they got to come and show up and control their PC.
Did everybody that you gave a faction to like already know how to play Axe?
Yes. Yeah, they did. Okay. Yeah, everyone knew how to play Axe. I didn't have any like totally new people. So that is the situation. Now, what ended up happening is they all schemed against each other. The Berserker kind of went into town and kind of catspawed and saw if they were actually going to band together or they were going to fight each other. He saw they all banded together. The Berserker ran away and regrouped and sent in his witch to work with Vince's cult leader to try and raise Cathaler. And long story short, it took about 4.5 hours, guys. Long story short, they raised Cathaler as all of the other faction leaders tried to arrive on time to kill what was the wet wedding. We called it the wet wedding because we ripped on you guys with your red kegger and the red wedding. So the wet
wedding. This is so stupid. I love it so much.
It's so stupid. That's why it's great.
Just picture some fishy Dagon thing going, hey,
yeah.
Hey.
So what had to happen was, I don't remember. Oh, you know what? Trabajo had a beautiful mid to call his own that he brought with him to get captured by the cult.
I'm just going to say that this is reinforcing what Brian said about there being a relation between the douche brigade and it's now part of the game. He doesn't make the rules. Oh no, what have we done? What have we done on this episode of Who is Dunder Moose?
Who is he? I don't know. And what is the wet wedding? So what happened was Trabajo showed up with his lovely mid to call his own, whose name was Midsummer. I now remember. So she showed up with him when he decided he was going to deliver himself to the cult because he put on a magic ring in a previous session. It was a cursed ring because he's just that stupid. Because he's a Florida man. And if he wouldn't have put on the ring, he would have got a bad grade. That's why grading is good.
Yeah.
So anyway, they did a wet wedding ceremony while they're standing in the river to marry Trabajo to Midsummer. Okay? And all the other factions that didn't want this Cathala to raise. So it was the Berserker and the cult leader guy had come together with this plan, and they thought it would work to re-raise Cathala. And then everybody else is like, oh, hell no, we had our own problems, and we're going to come together against this whole thing because we see what's happening. They did some investigation. They found out what their cult was. They killed the cult in their little Thieves Guild house, their little townhouse, but it slowed them down enough to where the wet wedding could go off. Now, Standing Mountain, the elf, that's why it's true romance. This is true, baby. This is great.
I'm losing it. Oh, man.
Standing Mountain himself was like flying, like the elf. He's like 5th level. So he's like this flying elf. He like flew towards the river when he realized what was happening. He shot a fireball. We did like reaction checks. We did initiatives, etc. The wedding went off on time. Like he didn't blow up the wedding before it was able to the sacrifice. And
if
that was
any
it.
Man has any reason why, fireball.
Fireball. I object to this wedding. So Cathala rose from the depths. All of these other faction leaders said, not no, but hell no. They all ran away. Cathala smashed everything in the city and every person that was aligned lawful.
Oh my gosh.
And it became a chaotic only city because if you aligned lawful, you had made any kind of like pledge to the lawful gods, she knew who you were and she smashed your house, your business. She kicked you across. She sang shake it off as she did it.
Just her and Ice Spice with the little...
Yeah, with the signs. And she smashed the tower that Billy had been building or took. And then she sat on it like a throne. So she's like this kaiju. So now, okay, so that sounds really, really stupid. And I'm surprised.
I am the monster. It's me. Sorry.
So people may have tuned out because I know when you listen to other people's session reports, you're like, that sounds ridiculous, and I've zoned out. But here's what matters to you guys in your one-to-one time stuff. We had all these elements, and if you do them in one-to-one time, you might get lost in the shuffle. It might be kind of boring because it's all NPC, blah, blah, blah. But if you make it into an NPC event and a PvP event, Kaiju Cathala, exactly. If you make it into a PvP event, you get to get the best of all worlds, okay? Because Patron Kyle, he wasn't able to be there with all his brigades, his ridiculously humongous army. But he was able to have an influence on it through one of his vassals.
Yeah.
And I was able to give the vassal to somebody else. He wasn't able to play on mic or whatever, which makes sense because it's a vassal. It's not him. So this person might make different decisions than he would make. Okay. And you get to have PCs that have reached 5th level or whatever that makes sense for the event. They can do stuff like big stuff. And not only in downtime, not only on solo play, but in like actual real stuff that's adjudicated by a DM in play.
Yeah.
So I think that the Battle Bronstein is the way to answer when patrons get a little bit too big for their britches. I really do.
And so it sounds like everybody that took part in Fishstein had a blast.
Oh God,
And
no! They hated it. They hated losing. They were so mad. If
really?
you ever get them on here, they're all going to be pissed off that they lost.
Okay.
Because the bad guys won, man. Players hate that. I mean, you don't, but you're a little bit bent.
I was the bad guys though, right? Like I was.
Yeah, good point.
I
Good
was
point.
Steddington.
Good point. Well, if you ever get them on, if you want to do that kind of roundtable with them, I don't know if they would, but they probably. Yeah. I think Billy himself would probably be like, he wasn't super happy that he lost. I think. Here's my thing with the Battle Bronstein. I think 6 hours is probably what you need.
Yeah.
Because I think if I did it in 4 hours, I think if I had 2 more hours, I probably could have answered some of the stuff I was being asked without rushing.
And they might have come up with some kind of counter to
the bad guys. Yeah. They had some good ideas. They did some good stuff. But I think if I had the extra 2 hours to play with, I could have been more fair to their schemes. Because as a DM, what Jeffrey will tell you, and he told us about the Battle Bronstein, is you just kind of take where it's going. Like, where's the actual action going to be? Where's the big stuff? Yeah. And there were a lot of guys that had some fun ideas. But I was just like, look, the wet wedding is what it's about. Just like the red kegger.
Yeah. It's just, there's one thing that rises above the rest and says this has the most promise for crazy. This is I had to scroll up a bit. This is an older post, but Jeffro says 4 years since Secrets of Blackmoor came before anybody ran in Bronstein as part of an ongoing D&D campaign. Why?
Because we're doofuses. Yeah, I mean that's basically it.
That gets to something though, is because a lot of times on Twitter with the dunking and the like, we have a united front on the argument app. And so not everybody gets to see that when we are together in the Discord or whatever, we are experimenting and trying things, and we are constantly jettisoning things that don't work and trying new things. And so a lot of them, they seem to have this idea that we are just totally ossified around a set of rules, and we are unchanging and unthinking and unblinking. When in reality, the experience that I've had since I've taken part in this BrOSR stuff is people on the absolute cutting edge playing with the most fun concepts in gaming has been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, listen to what I just said. I just handed a bunch of armies to a bunch of idiots and let them destroy a town. Like, who else is doing that? There's no OSR doing that.
Because of 1-to-1, you had so much ammo to hand them too. It wasn't like you had a blank canvas and they had to paint it. You had stuff just lying around.
Yeah, what I would recommend for Battle Bronstein, and this is 1-to-1 time vaguely, and I know we're getting a little off topic, but we're near the end here. But
we are. 2 hours.
Yeah, like I just enjoyed telling that story again. I'm glad people enjoyed. Like, looked like Brown Wizard said, it was as good in verbal as the session report, which I appreciate, Brown Wizard. Thank you. I think your module is great. I'm not going to insult it. I've never read it, but I'm sure it's terrific. I hope people all buy it. Everyone go give him money. He deserves it. He deserves it for writing something.
All the support that comes his way.
Yes, exactly. And I totally agree. I mean, I won't buy it, but I hope all of you buy it.
It's ploppable.
Yeah,
it's so ploppable.
It makes it sound like poop, but thank you. Appreciate that. We're going back to that
guy would love it.
1-to-1 restroom back again. So anyway, moving on. You just let me talk for a second. What I think that you can do with 1-to-1 time in sessions, no prep sessions, is you can have PCs fill out various regions of your campaign. And when you start to develop these things that interest the DM, sometimes they won't interest the players. Like, I know for a fact that Billy, when he went and pissed off the Berserker, would have rather I just forgot about that guy. Okay? That's a fact. He didn't want that guy to hold a grudge and come find him. Obviously. What player wants that, right? But as a DM, you're like, this is pretty interesting. This is good stuff. Now, you can do a couple things. You can try to deliver it in 1-to-1 time. And you can try to Battle Bronstein it.
Yeah.
And if you have players playing these low prep sessions, they're going to start developing these stories in these regional areas. And you guys proved it with Who's Caresville. you're going to have these stories in these regional areas where you're going to like, I need to deliver the story. This story is interesting to the DM, at least at a minimum.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will be interesting to multiple people, the DM and a couple of players, maybe not every single player, but enough to make something cool. In this case, I was very interested in what the Berserker was going to do. I was very interested in what the Cult was going to do. And I think Vince/Trabajo was probably pretty interested in what the Cult was going to do because he put on the Cursed Ring. Now, whether he wanted to be the one to make the Cult win, I don't know about that. Thigh Master. So, yeah, good one. I'll let you go ahead and share this
what
thing.
Jeffro said, to not play the Dragon Eggs would have been a crime. So yeah, the things that now Jeffro, I don't know if maybe just because of who cares, but like stuff that nobody was interested in became super important, like the couch and stuff. But like what you're saying is, there are things there that just capture fascination, and it's like you want to see.
Well, and they seem to make sense. Like you start thinking of, we talked about episodic play and short stories of Appendix N. You know, like a lot of the Conan stories that were war stories of him fighting wars of this kingdom versus they could have been battle Bronsteins.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's a way for us to deliver that episodic part of that episode, that short story. You know, the Battle of the Five Armies. You don't necessarily have to have every single leader of the five armies be a patron for months on end. You know what I mean? Like you can have the Battle of the Five Armies be like, you know, you got Bilbo who's a PC, you got Thorn who's a PC because he's been trying to get to this place, blah blah blah, and then you have like 3 just Battle Bronstein NPCs that show up that you guys have met during the course of the adventure. They can become the guys. Like the Battle of the Five Armies is a Battle Bronstein, or could be.
It was like the Golden Eagle Army. They only just show up to fight and transport. And they're like, I'm not going to, you know, we're not going to be negotiating with you guys. We don't care. We're just going to help out for this one thing.
And I think that's the way to deliver and give these patrons who have gotten like really, really powerful or too big for their britches, to give them a jolt, a shot in the arm, a little bit of something to think about. Like, hey, anything can happen. And I'm going to explore Battle Bronstein on the extreme high level with Kyle, who controls like basically like a duchy, and Drakon, who controls a duchy essentially. I'm going to do one before the end of the year for sure, because I'm going to think of something that Kyle and Drakon and some NPCs of that same scale, something that they want, some sort of MacGuffin story, and I'm going to hit them with it. What are we laughing at? Read it.
Vince says, we're listening to this boring podcast because Trabajo wanted his girl to be just a bit more attractive.
Look, you guys, stop dunking on him. That's my shtick. That's my gimmick. Stop it, okay? You guys are the chat hecklers. You're not dumping on... Know your role. We're going back to rock, okay? Good Lord. So this is a way you can deliver on one-to-one time on something that's really dynamic and really interesting. I fully endorse the Battle of Bronstein. I challenge every single BrOSR DM to deliver on one before, let's say, June.
All right.
Do it. If you don't do it, I'm going to talk all kinds of mad smack about you, and I'm really good at it. I can run a promo, and you will get wrecked.
I can vouch.
You will get wrecked. You have until June. Every BrOSR DM a Battle Bronstein before June. I want the receipts. I want to hear about it. You all have those things in your campaign that you're thinking, man, I wish there would have been more going on there. There is more going on there. Do it. Make it PvP. Give it to the players. Make it happen. Now, last thing, we're 2 hours and 12 minutes. Last thing. Jeffro, as per usual, didn't understand anything. I made a scoring system for my Battle Bronstein. Okay. And the reward for getting a score was that you get the player who controlled the faction would get an XP bump and a training gold bump for 2 sessions, 3 sessions, whatever it was. I don't remember what it was. I think first place was like your next 4 sessions, you have like 10% more XP and free training, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, Jeff was like, oh, just play your role. Just do your alignment. No. The reason I did that is this. He talks about the get-along gang, but I'm trying to stop the get-along gang. All of these players have so many in-world, real-world reasons and in-game reasons, return on investment reasons to be get-along gang. Okay? But Standing Mountain the Elf had some weird things that he wanted to accomplish that might not have aligned with Billy, the mayor of the town. So he might have turned against Billy, even though they used to adventure together. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Well,
So
it's
I made a
diplomacy,
scoring.
right?
So I just made a scoring system that rewarded that kind of crap.
Yeah.
So and then I had like the berserker, because he's chaotic and he likes the wilderness. He didn't really want to be the ruler of the town, so he was trying to find a way. So I made a scoring system where he would get extra points if he installed somebody he could control to run the town. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's
How
like
long did that kind of stuff, that the gamesmanship preparations come about? Like,
as much as it took Jeffro to make a map. I didn't make a map. I just was like, people kept asking me, "Oh, you need a map." I kept
so
having
you were
players.
coming up with like win conditions for each
Yeah, it was.
faction.
Yeah, it was scoring conditions, and I had like a basic one that was like 500 points, a little bit harder one that was like 1,000, and then like a berserk ridiculous one that was like 5,000. Something stupid like for
Yeah.
the cold it was like raise Cathaler, and it was like, oh, how do you raise her? It's like I had no earthly idea how to do it. I was like, you figure it out during the course of the Battle Bronstein, and I'll
Oh.
consider if it seems realistic. It's
So
no
you put
prep.
it on them and made them come up with a good answer.
Yeah,
and you got to judge.
Yeah, the elf's big point scoring thing was like open a portal to Elfland. And it's like, well, how do you do that? I was like, I don't freaking know. I don't know. You figure it out. Like that's like that's in session, that wouldn't be a big deal, right? If you told a
Yeah.
player like find a way to go find an army to a player in a regular session, you'd be like, that wouldn't be a big deal. You'd tell them that. You'd say, you figure it out. I don't know. You figure it out.
Well,
So
see that I don't know. You figure it out. Like I was able to get a lot of stuff done in my Battle Bronstein because I had figured stuff out, and when I just announced it to the other players, they were just like, "Oh, okay."
yeah, but that's the kind. Yeah, you're kind of the other way around. I was trying to get
Yeah.
them to score. The reason I made the scoring system was to try to limit the get along gang. So,
Yeah.
I think a scoring system with a reward that players care about, that can be a meta reward, like I'm doing, like XP bonus and stuff.
Initiates that Mexican standoff.
Yeah, it initiates it. Now, did that work? Kinda. The good guys who kind of ran together all sort of jumped together and went against the NPCs anyway. So, was it successful? Kinda. I think they kind of schemed against each other a little bit until they saw the threat was too big, and then they kind of gave up their schemes and hoped that they could return to it after they dealt with the big threat of Cathaler. But the reason behind it, even though it had fair to middling success, the reason behind it was to let people play their PCs
Yeah.
in the Battle Bronstein, which is, I think, the killer app. I think if people can bring their level 5, level 6, level 7 PCs to this stuff, that's what's going to really deliver.
Well, I think Bob had a great time bringing his Billy in.
Yeah, so it's like he was able to do it, but no one else really was, because Keffer said, I don't care about any of you guys. But he basically, Robert Stevens basically called his bluff. Like, I'm showing up anyway. Heck with you. I don't care. Like, that was smart. Like, he just called Jeffro's bluff. Like, Jeffro said no PCs, and Robert Stevens said, I'm a PC and I'm here. I don't care. So there's a lot of different ways to see this. I think if you have 9-point alignment, you can go with rolls a little bit more. But I think to let PCs deliver, and when you have PCs that really like to teamwork and don't really want to do PvP as much, you kind of have to give them a reason.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a scoring system might work. I had fair to middling success with that. I'm not saying it was the perfect storm.
Well, Jeffro points out that David Wesley had a scoring system.
Okay. Well, there you go. So it's not against it. I think Jeffro's thing works fine because he was all NPCs. When it's all NPCs, it's just about who can make the goofiest thing happen. It's like who can make the most memories.
He does point out Dunder's Prep, which I rejected, became canon because the referee can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah, of course it can become canon. If you make it up, it's canon.
Reference Mephrodis's original posts about mogging the DM being more fun than mogging the other players.
Yeah, you should always mog the DM. And I said you over prepped with your steadying of the Hill Giants module. You know what? I've come around. That was a great idea.
Thanks, bro.
Bring in more giants through the portal and ruin that entire region. Stomp on Who Caresville until Chaz the elf, my patron, can get in there and take over.
Right on. Round ears cause tears, right? I keep bringing Thorsten's comment up. And then I lost it again because it's way up there. But he's basically asking for advice. How do I run my own? Especially now that you've laid this challenge. And maybe this can be the last thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
Get on it by June. Have a 1-to-1 time BrOSR style Battle Bronstein. or you don't bear the title BrOSR.
No, you're done. You're out. You can't use the hashtag anymore.
Right. So what advice would you give people that maybe they're just hearing about it for the first time, or maybe they want to do it, but they're about to step on a landmine and make a bunch of mistakes?
Okay. For number one, understand you're going to step on a landmine. It's going to explode your campaign, and that is beautiful. It's just
Right
beautiful. That's number one. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Who caresville? It doesn't matter. Okay. Number two, you certainly 2024 is the year of Battle Bronstein. I agree, Jeffro. Well done. I'm glad I put down this challenge.
I am too.
Hashtag thank you, Dubs. So number two, every DM who's ran a campaign for more than 10 or 15 sessions has areas that they feel like got forgotten, of things that they thought were really cool the players want to run away from primarily. You might say, oh, the players weren't interested. No. In some cases, the players are just scared.
Yeah.
Okay. So bring those back. Bring them back. Look back to see when the last time the players dealt with them. If it was like 2 months ago, give that NPC 2 months to build its forces to do whatever it is you think it would have been doing. If it was 6 months ago, give them 6 months. If it was not that long ago, or you just don't have any ideas, go to the guy you would like to run it in the Battle Bronze and like, hey, look, you're going to run the silver hat ogres that have the cool silver hats they're obsessed with. What would they be doing for these last 6 months? What do you think, buddy? Because you're going to run them in the Battle Bronstein. And he'll go, oh, I want to play my PC. He's like, dude, you're on level 2. You don't get to be part of this as a PC. Sorry. You're out of luck, Chuck.
Yeah.
That's what you would do. But then the PC who is level 5, 6, or 7, you say, hey, you're actually going to be part of this Battle Bronstein. Here's what the general gist of it's going to be. You may have heard this or this or this, or if they're going to be totally surprised, you just don't tell them. You just say, you need to be here on this date, or you make sure you schedule with them they're there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jeffro, just a guy showed up and he was like, all right, here's 200 orcs, go nuts.
Yeah, why not? I don't
You're
see a problem. Yeah, if you don't know what they would be doing, maybe give them some one-to-one time to play with it a little bit, like retcon it a little bit, like how you had 6 months to prep. What would you be doing with that 6 months? Because as a DM, you're like, hey, those silver hat orcs were pretty cool, but I don't really know what they'd be doing. They were just mad at the PCs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they would have done anything with that, but they were definitely angry, and they're going to do something. So you can play that game. Or you can give it to them and say, here's why they're mad at the PCs, here's why they're mad at this point of interest, or here's the MacGuffin, and do that too.
Renninger's doing a Gangbusters Battle Bronstein.
I would love to see that.
He points out one issue with Bronsteins is the information vacuum can be paralyzing. People need to talk to each other. Would you recommend doing what you did and like having some incentives that you've already written up to pass out to them and say, hey, if you can pull this off, then you get a bonus?
I mean, there's negatives and positives of that. The positive to it is you avoid some of the get along gang stuff in theory. Yeah. Now, my success with that wasn't 100%. It was like 50%. I know that they were kind of scheming against each other, the PCs who previously ran with each other. But then the negative of that is that the DM's ideas might not be as cool as what the player might have come up with.
Yeah.
I think I would probably look at the level and the caliber of your players.
I like the idea of starting off and saying, all right, here's what your guy cares about at the beginning of this thing, but that's open to change, and hope that they can substitute better goals.
Yeah, I would say judge your players. I think that the Dubs run players are a little bit more get along gang than they should be, in my opinion. So I think that's why I kind of pushed it a little more than I might have. I think the Trilopulus player on the whole are more just trying to deliver on whatever the role is and trying to ruin everything.
I never know what Renninger's up to.
Yeah, I would say Trilopulus caliber players probably don't need it. But Dubs run caliber players are A, but they're not A+ students. They maybe need a little bit of guidance.
That was another thing that I wasn't ready for. A difference between conventional play and BrOSR play is, and I think this came out on Twitter recently, was the amount of trust you have in your fellow players.
Yeah, man, you got to trust them. But we're at 2 hours and 20 minutes.
You're right.
We want to wrap it.
Any closing? Do you have like a I'm praying for you or any like type of button you put on the end of your stuff, or
what are you talking about? My closing thing. Oh, you're doing the John Mollison thing.
Yeah.
My closing commentary is the BrOSR is great. and all the rest of you are terrible. All of your campaigns are awful. Conventional campaigns are a waste of time. Okay. 1-1 time, 2-2 time, all kinds of time. 1-1 bathroom time. It's a waste. No one should be playing conventional campaigns ever. 1-1 time is the panacea. It is the solution. It is the innovation. It is the revolution. It's everything. You are all wasting your time 1-1 and otherwise playing conventional campaigns. You should switch to 1-1 time. If you are OSR and have come at the BrOSR with your angry commentary, just know we don't need you. We don't like you. We are praying for you to come around, to submit to Rome. We're praying for you to come around and try real D&D at 1-1 Jeff Rogaxian time, as long as you don't bring it to us. Because even if you do switch to 1-1 time, we are not interested in playing with you because you are terrible in every way. And we're not interested in your commentary. Most of your PCs are probably terrible. Your class builds probably don't know what you're doing. Your creativity is probably lax and lacking.
Right on. BDubs. Well, first of all, there you guys have it. He comes on here and he improves my show. And if you listen to him, he will improve your game. It's been an honor and a pleasure having you once again. I hope maybe after you do your high level Bronstein, if you're interested, you have an invitation to come back on if you like. And for the rest of you guys, have a great night. You may need to watch this one again to catch all the gems that drop. I know I'm going to certainly rewatch it. But yeah, have a good one, guys.
God bless everyone.